It's October 31st, 2021, and anyone who's anyone in the upper crust of society knows that there's really only one place to celebrate Halloween if you want to stay relevant: a certain Norwegian billionaire's yearly costume ball. Invitations are highly exclusive, and if you have to ask where you can get one, you're definitely not on the list. Those lucky, beautiful, famous, or just plain rich enough to be invited receive the notice a year in advance, in an increasingly elaborate fashion each time. Rumor has it that one year the billionaire specially trained a flock of purebred carrier pigeons to deliver the invites, printed on scrolls recovered from the ruins of the Library of Alexandria. But that's just a rumor, of course. This year's invitations arrived in the form of a luxury sports car with a simple, gold-embossed card hidden in the glove compartment that read, "Lucky You." It then provided information on this year's theme, medieval fantasy. The dress code would be strict, and failure to comply would result in being barred from entering the event. It also included a vital piece of carefully guarded information: the location of the party. The lavish event is held in the billionaire's castle, nestled in the remote countryside of Norway, which he had built a decade ago specifically for this one night a year. For the other 364 days, it sits vacant, except for a full staff to keep it in prime condition, of course. As a group of first-time partygoers pull up the long, winding driveway to the castle's gates, their limo is stopped by a guard. "Your driver will need to let you out here," he explains. "Can't have someone who isn't on the list coming up to the residence," your host insists. And so the group, 2 men and 2 women, climbs out of the car, and they all make their way up the drive on foot. They didn't prepare for the trek, and by the time they reach the castle gates, the ladies are sweating into their exquisite handmade gowns, and one of the gentlemen has torn a small hole in his tights. Nevertheless, they have arrived at what promises to be a truly grand occasion. Once the gates creak open and grant them admission, they quickly forget the discomfort of the long walk. Reports of the event have not, in fact, been greatly exaggerated. It is every inch as impressive as they could have imagined it would be. A lush golden carpet rolls out from the doors into the ballroom, and a herald clad in period attire blows a horn to signal their arrival. He announces their names to the room, where beautiful people are already dancing and frolicking to their heart's content. There are rows and rows of delicious-looking food, including roasted pigs, fresh fruit, and cakes. There are fountains filled with the finest champagne, and a full orchestra provides live music that fills the enormous halls. Above it all, the host himself sits, dressed in regal robes and a crown positively dripping with jewels. It is the most indulgent, decadent, glorious event any of them have ever been a part of. There are no clocks inside the party castle, and no other way to note the passage of time while inside. This is entirely deliberate, and an event there ends only when the guests have all grown too weary to continue the merriment. It is for this reason that the 4 newcomers do not notice how late it has grown, or the fact that one day has already bled into the next outside the castle. By the time they stumble back outside, filled with cake, champagne, and fresh gossip they can't wait to repeat, it is nearly dawn. They walk back down the path that led them to the castle, their steps a little heavier with exhaustion and the aforementioned champagne, and notice that there are rows of limousines and other cars waiting where they were dropped off. "Excuse me," one of the women calls out to a guard. "Where's our limo?" "Where did you tell him to wait?" the guard responds. At this, the woman looks at her companions, who all shrug. None of them were aware of this practice, and they sent the driver home when they left the car. "We didn't," she explains. The guard stares at her blankly for a moment, then bursts out laughing. "Well then," he says, "you'll just have to walk." Surely there's a contingency plan in place, right? Their wealthy host can't expect his guests to walk home if they didn't think to plan ahead and tell their driver to wait all night. The group waits for the punchline, to reveal that there is a driver on staff ready to give them a ride or someone who can call them a cab, but it never comes. Not only that, but none of their cell phones have a signal. They can't call the driver to come back, even if he wasn't likely to be dead asleep at this hour. The guard is right, they will have to walk, at least until they have enough of a signal to call for a taxi. So, with no other option in sight, the disillusioned partygoers begin the long journey back to civilization. Light is beginning to trickle back onto the landscape, allowing them to at least see where they are going, but it is still mostly dark as they make their way along the road. "Are we safe out here?" one of the men asks. "From what, muggers?" the other replies. "There could be bears out here," one of the women remarks. "No," the other woman insists. "The bears are all hibernating this time of year, aren't they?" They all collectively shiver at the thought of encountering a bear or anything else out on this lonely road, with nowhere to hide and no way to defend themselves. Best not to dwell too long on that thought, or they might find themselves paralyzed with fear. They still have who knows how many steps left to go before they can relax. They walk together in silence for a long time, listening for the sound of any dangerous criminals or bears creeping up behind them, but nothing comes. As they slowly progress, the sun begins to emerge on the horizon, flooding the landscape with warm light and chasing away the fear of the dark. "Look!" one of the ladies finally breaks the silence. "Up there!" She points, directing her friend's attention to a hill up ahead. There, they can make out the silhouettes of men on horseback, wearing suits of medieval armor. They're dressed as knights, like something out of a King Arthur story. "They must have come from the party." The others nod, agreeing. "Maybe we could ask for a ride?" one of the men suggests. "Or to borrow a horse," the other chimes in. In agreement, the four approach the knights in shining armor, waving their arms as they go. "Halt! Who goes there?" shouts one of the knights. "Oh, there's no need for that," the other woman laughs. "We came from the same place." "Art thou friend or foe?" the knight asks. He does not remove his helmet. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword. Thinking it all must be some kind of joke, the group of partiers continues up the hill. Spurred to action, the knight draws his sword, brandishing it threateningly. This is enough to stop the group in their tracks. "Is he serious?" mutters one woman to the other. "I can't tell," she replies. "That sword looks pretty real, though." Behind them, they hear the clip-clop of hooves and turn to see two other knights sitting atop massive black horses, brandishing weapons. "I think we should go," she yells to her friends, gathering her skirts and running back down the hill, but the rest of the group don't seem so willing to turn back. "You want to play a game? Then let's play," says one of the men as he draws his own sword, a perfect replica of one wielded by a character in his favorite fantasy television series, and tries to wave it back at the knight, but he promptly drops it on the grass. It's much heavier than he thought it would be. "Leave this place now, or face your death," a voice bellows from above him. "Now wait just a minute, who do you think you're talking to?" the man says as he bends down to pick his sword up again. But before he can finish, there's a flash of glimmering steel in the sunlight, followed by a spray of dark red liquid that hits the rest of the partygoers. They watch in silent horror as the man's head rolls off his shoulders before looking back at the man on horseback. This isn't a game at all. The blood-stained partygoers turn and run from these frightening strangers on horseback, but they can hear the thunderous hooves following them, the clank of the metal armor. The woman who first began to run looks back over her shoulder and can't believe what she sees. It's a rout as the mounted knights chase their fleeing foes, cutting them down in their retreat. All she can do is run and hope that they're too distracted with their current quarry to come after her. She doesn't know how long she runs before the sound of the massacre starts to fade out, but eventually, it does. Unable to run any longer, she collapses in the grass, frightened and confused by all that has happened. But with a scream, she jumps to her feet once again as she hears footsteps behind her. "You can't sleep here," says a man with a harsh barking voice. "This is a restricted area." Before her stands the second group of armed men she's seen that day. This time, they're dressed in modern military attire. The Norwegian army? She can't be sure. The man doesn't have an accent. She starts to plead with the man, but he abruptly cuts her off. "What year is it?" he asks, his expression serious. She answers, confused, giving him the current year. He relaxes. "This area is closed to the public. It's not safe for you to be here. Let me escort you out of the perimeter," he offers. She tries to tell him what she's seen, the strange men on horseback, her friends being slaughtered before her eyes. When the man asks how she got there, she lets the whole story come pouring out. The billionaire, the invitation, the party. In her frantic state, she doesn't notice one of the guards, who radios to someone that it looks like he's done it again. The man questioning her changes his tone. He doesn't seem at all concerned about a murderous group of medieval knights in the woods. "Sounds like you had a bit too much to drink," he tells her before putting a comforting arm around her shoulders. And she doesn't even notice the syringe until she feels a prick on her upper arm before losing consciousness. The woman would be returned home and have no memories of the events that she witnessed. She'd never remember how much danger she was in when she had a brush with SCP-526. SCP-526, also known as the Valhalla Gate, is located on a hill in Norway. The SCP Foundation has hidden information on the gate's exact whereabouts, no doubt to stop curious civilians from wandering into danger or filming short viral videos. But if you find yourself in the Norwegian countryside, it can still easily be identified. Simply look for a ring of 9 stones, each standing at about 2 meters tall, placed in a 10-meter radius at the top of the hill. If you're not certain whether you're in the right place, or if you just happened upon another mysterious stone circle, look for the runes inscribed on the inward surface of each one. If the runes are there, you're in the right place. Or the wrong place, depending on who you ask. Every day at sunrise, give or take about 15 minutes, the gate will open and release a group of warriors from any point in history, fully armed and outfitted for battle. These can range from a small group of archers to 300 Spartans to groups of highly trained special operatives, and every member of the temporarily displaced group will be from the same period in history. As if they all ran through some sort of rift at the same time. Though these resulting manifestations rarely harm anyone, staying in place 92% of the time after they first appear on the hilltop, the remaining 8% lead to scenarios which can truly be a bloodbath. After all, to an army lost in the fog of war, emerging in a strange land in an unfamiliar time, anyone can look like an enemy. No matter how they behave on their initial appearance, those who cross through SCP-526 will attempt to attack anyone who approaches the anomaly. They will remain in the area until sunset, at which time they disappear, presumably returning back to wherever and whenever they originated. The SCP Foundation first discovered SCP-526 after a group of backpackers were hospitalized in the area. They claimed to have been walking through the hills when suddenly they were swarmed by, quote, a bunch of Vikings with axes. Naturally, this drew the attention of Foundation field agents, who soon found the mystical stone circle responsible for the attack. The survivors were given amnestics, and a cover story circulated blaming the claims of Vikings on recreational hallucinogens. Since this first incident, notable encounters between the Foundation and the soldiers traveling through the temporal gate have been few and far between, but there have been a few that were designated significant enough to be recorded in the official archives. 4, to be exact. In the 1990s, a member of the Foundation containment team spotted 40 figures making their way down the hill in the dim dawn light. They were holding longbows and swords, weapons at the ready as they made their descent. One member of the team, who it should be noted was on his very first day of containment duty, made the mistake of calling out to the strangers. "Gentlemen, please lower your weapons," he called. His request, however polite it may have been, was answered with an arrow to the shoulder. Thankfully, the rest of the team was able to swoop in and settle things before the situation could progress any further. The injured personnel was given prompt medical attention and reassigned to a desk job, where he was much less likely to encounter flying projectiles of any kind. A few years later, the team of Foundation operatives placed at SCP-526 had started to grow complacent. There had not been a violent incident in ages, just a series of very confused people appearing at sunrise and milling around until they vanished at sunset. It seemed that most of the subjects passing through the temporal rift were not as bloodthirsty as one might expect. Then, one operative was startled out of a daydream by the thunk of a stone axe hitting a tree near his head. He and the rest of his team looked up to see a group of 30 men clad in animal skins pouring down the hillside, rushing right for them. In their fists, they held crude weapons carved from stone, their wild eyes, untamed beards, and blood-stained clothing becoming clearer as they grew closer. Fortunately for the SCP Foundation, these cavemen had brought clubs to a semi-automatic rifle fight. They opened fire, and within minutes, not a single hide-clad man was left standing. It was a bit awkward, looking at their fallen bodies for the rest of the day, but the team saw no point in moving them if they were just going to disappear that night anyway. One task force member spent the rest of the day looking at his hands, paranoid he may have shot one of his ancient ancestors and erased himself from the timeline in a back-to-the-future-like fashion. This was, thankfully, not the case. Several more years passed, and the century turned to usher in the new millennia. In the early 2000s, a platoon of 20 Russian soldiers, later identified when a Foundation officer attempted to translate several curses yelled at him by one of the men, materialized, wearing World War II uniforms and carrying rifles consistent with that time period. Most of them did not move from the hill, staying in a defensive position, but a few got a bit too bold and opened fire on the Foundation operatives. The fire was returned in kind, and 2 men were killed, but the rest were left unharmed for the remainder of the day. The final incident on record is particularly notable because, in this case, the soldiers that appeared did not belong to a particular country's military, nor were they from the distant past. There were 30 men and women, dressed in an uncomfortably recognizable uniform. These were the members of a lost SCP Foundation mobile task force, all killed in action during a field mission several years prior. Wanting to avoid friendly fire, the operatives placed at the site attempted to speak to these MTF members, but they did not respond. Instead, they attacked and would not relent until air support arrived in the form of a Foundation AC-130 gunship, Thor's Hammer, leaving 3 dead and 11 wounded when the smoke finally cleared. This last encounter raised some difficult questions about the nature of SCP-526 and the mental state of those who passed through it. They seemed unable to recognize their own peers, unable to hear what they were saying. Their instinct to defend SCP-526 from any perceived invaders overrode whatever familiarity or loyalty they might ordinarily have for other Foundation operatives. It was a tragic, disquieting affair with no clear answers in sight. The SCP Foundation is of course no stranger to terminating its own, but the individual officers present for this incident reported a high rate of post-traumatic stress disorder, and several requested to be given amnestics in order to put a stop to recurring nightmares. The Foundation will not be able to learn more unless more of their own fallen soldiers pass through the gate. Even if they do, it is impossible to say whether they will be able to ask any questions or engage in a dialogue, or whether they will have to gun them down in another round of kill or be killed. Because there is no way to know what each new sunrise at SCP-526 will bring, the SCP Foundation has classified the anomaly as Euclid. As there is no way to move SCP-526 to any official Foundation site, the 15-kilometer radius around the anomaly has been converted into Armed Containment Area 31. The cover story for this area is a military weapon testing site, and there is a no-fly zone in effect there. A team of qualified field agents is placed on site in order to observe and neutralize any subjects that emerge from SCP-526. Because all is fair in war and, well, war, the agents placed there are permitted to use deadly force if their lives are threatened or the containment is jeopardized. 30 minutes before the sun comes up, the containment teams are placed on full alert and will keep their eyes on SCP-526 until the sun has set and all potential threats have disappeared. If a given day's apparitions are too aggressive or too numerous for the teams on the ground to contain, Mobile Task Force Sigma-9, or Valkyries, may assist via airstrike. Since the Foundation has set up its perimeter around SCP-526, no civilians have been harmed, though the same can't be said for Foundation personnel or the revolving door of strange warriors emerging on the hill. The protocol has been considered successful. I haven't yet been out to see the gate in person myself. I tend to be more of a pacifist, but if I ever do, I'll make sure to bring a shield, a bulletproof vest, and perhaps a full suit of armor. Why not? The best offense is a good defense, I always say. It's June 15th, 1995, and it's also one of the most exciting days of the year for a very select group. The Cedar Creek Parish Bible Study Group Field Trip. A band of 10 friendly faithfuls of all ages, shapes, and ethnicities borrowing the church bus for the weekend and heading out to the wilderness to admire some of God's creation. What's the point of spending all your days with your nose in the good book if you never appreciate the bounty of nature? As it was said in Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. The group drives 3 hours out of town, along with hiking and camping gear, to a semi-mountainous region that the head of the group insists is a beautiful, picturesque location that will feel like a perfect break from the musty old church function room. It would be a wonderful place to remind them all what it was all about, the splendid world God put them all on, and all the gifts He gave them. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." As it was written in Genesis 1:26, the group makes their way through corridors of tall, lush evergreens, like pillars that hold up the sky. It's a strenuous walk, but it sure does get the blood pumping. They walk with trekking poles, munch granola bars, and take frequent sips from their canteens. Nobody wants to get heat stroke, after all. They admire the birds perched above, the clutches of wildflowers, and the skittering things in the undergrowth. Everyone is on the lookout for their first deer. But one member of the group, a young man, suddenly notices something out of the ordinary. It looks like a balloon, but one made out of creamy, nut-brown deer pelt. It's tied with several strings to a small notebook with no identifying markings. Perhaps part of some strange forest arts and crafts project? Very strange indeed. While the others move on, the young man, fueled by his curiosity and comforted by the fact that his young legs could easily catch up with his elders, decides to use his trekking pole to fish the balloon out of the tree branch. The book falls down to the ground with a quiet thud. He picks it up, brushes off the dust, and stows it away in his backpack. It'll make some wonderful fireside reading when they all set up camp for the evening. As the hours drag on, and the study group finds themselves deeper in this natural paradise than ever before, they find themselves in a clearing, which they decide is a great area to make camp. Some of them start setting up their tents, while others head out into the trees to hunt down some kindling for the campfire. When they return, one of them is clearly shaken. When others inquire as to why, they simply force a smile and say, "It's nothing, just my eyes playing tricks on me. Been a long, hot day." Within the hour, they're crowded around a roaring campfire. Some toast marshmallows, others hot dogs. One of the elder members of the group has somehow materialized an acoustic guitar to belt out an obligatory kumbaya or two. Everything is as it should be. The young man, enjoying the warmth of the fire and his companions, decides to finally take a look at the book he'd rescued from the tree earlier that same day. It's certainly strange. There's no titles, and it isn't attributed to any kind of author, nor are there any chapter headings. It's printed, not handwritten, on thick, high-quality paper. But the content of this book is what's strangest of all. He starts to read, solely out of morbid curiosity. Mostly. We are currently approaching the precipice of an exciting new age, one in which we can finally take our well-earned place among the pantheon of great ones we see walking among us every single day. While there is still a ways to go before we reach this nirvana, rejoice, for our goals have never been more attainable. We have served for so long, we have done our part. Beasts of burden, meat, milk, hide, bones to glue and gelatin, eyes and horns to medicine. We have always played our part, and now we are given the power to transcend. It's in our hands now, friends. We have sat at the sides of the great ones, protected their homes, been honored by a place on their dinner plates. With these next steps, we shall be granted seats at their table, eye to eye, equal, speaking in their beautiful tongue, and being heard and understood. For so long, this has been a fantasy, an unattainable dream, glinting and distant like the echoing lights of long-dead stars. But through our work, everything has changed. We will deliver you from the darkness and into the light. In the shadow of the tower, we will leave behind our old flesh and elevate ourselves. God built the great ones in his likeness. They are his chosen people. But God, in his infinite wisdom, has given us the tools to choose ourselves. Like Job, all the suffering, all the subjugation, all the sacrifice has been merely a test of faith. And have we not proven ourselves faithful, friends? But the sacrifices are not yet over. Only through death and rebirth can we truly transform. Many of us have already made this leap of faith, but it is through death that you must deliver the others. It will be hard. It is in their nature as beasts to try to survive against all attempts to take their lives, but it must be done. These instincts must be squashed if ever they are to be more than beasts. Harden your hearts and rejoice despite the troubles, my brothers. The time of great change will soon be at hand, but first, it is imperative that we cleanse the world for the great ones. The tower knows. The tower is your shepherd, and it must be followed. Simply remember, whatever goes upon 2 legs is a friend. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is an enemy. Everything we do in reverence of the great ones. The young man shivers and closes the book. Something about it felt so sacrilegious. It read like an essay written by some kind of fanatical maniac whose ideology seemed like a bizarre mix of Christianity and some other strange, unknowable belief system. He looks up and sees that many of the others have already turned in for the night. Perhaps he ought to do the same. Almost involuntarily, he throws the thin volume into the last of the fire. It goes up quickly, claimed by the orange tongues of flame, until it goes black and crumbles into ash. He has a moment of guilt about burning a book, even one as strange as this, but perhaps it would be better off that way. The young man has trouble going to sleep that night. He knows deep down that it's probably just because that strange book put ideas in his head, but he could swear he sees something moving in the trees, just beyond the fire's dying light. Something human-shaped, but decidedly not human. Everything feels a little easier the next morning. The sun is bright, and the air is crisp and clean. They're all ready for another day of walking even deeper into the forest. They clean up their campsite and press on further into the heart of the wilderness. As the group walks, the young man still can't shake the strange feeling he got from reading that book last night. Had it all just been some strange prank, perhaps? That's the conclusion he settles on, just for some peace of mind. The last thing he wants to think about is some crazed cult hiding out in the woods he and his fellow Bible students are currently hiking through. The kind of people who are strange enough to staunchly believe that the most effective method of preaching is distributing religious literature via animal pelt balloon. The young man is so wrapped up in his worries that he doesn't notice how much time or distance they're passing. Before he knows it, he looks up and sees something dark and tall cresting out of the ground several hundred feet in the distance. It's a great twisting metal tower in a clearing. A tower, just like it had said in the book. Something glows around its base, a number of strange openings in the ground like mine shafts. He can vaguely spot more strange shapes moving in and out of it at the base of the tower, more of those things that are shaped like humans, but aren't. And above that, above even the tower, little dots in the sky, more balloons carrying books. But none of the others seem to notice that. Instead, they're looking off to the side, staring at a large buck with tall, proud antlers standing amongst the trees. Some are gasping, others are taking pictures. The young man is desperately trying to turn their attention towards a tower that looked like it had come straight out of a fantasy novel, but they only had eyes for the deer. The thing that the young man hoped they would all see, though, would soon be demanding their attention. A pair of strange figures sprint out of the forest. They're grotesque nightmare cyborgs, flesh that had once been animal twisted into the shape of man, held together by spinning cogs, wires, and pulleys, terrible affronts to God's creations. Their faces are disgustingly flat, dripping with drool and home to wild, swiveling eyes, staggering unnaturally on their two hind legs. The mere sight of them elicits screams from the group. They jump onto the buck like a pair of vicious predators, one grabbing it around the neck and the other leaping onto its back. Striking, squeezing, biting, and clawing, their attack is horribly ferocious, but mercifully quick. The buck is soon on the ground, as its two abominable attackers wrench the life from it. All the members of the study group, including the young man, are too horrified to move. They watch as the creatures finish off the buck, then lift its limp body like two paramedics carting off a stretcher, carrying it straight back to the tower in the distance. The group finally returns to their senses and begins to run in the opposite direction. Even the oldest among them find a kind of energy they haven't had in years. They clear the distance that had taken them a day and a half before in mere hours, but by the time they make it back to the bus that brought them here, it's still almost nightfall. As they pile on, only the young man looks back. In the dimming light of dusk, he sees small dark shapes in the sky above the trees. More balloons, each one carrying a strange little book. He's left with a question he'd never know the answer to. What is going on in those deep, dark woods? Of course, that question would only remain until personnel from the SCP Foundation would come and wipe it from his mind. In the midst of so many dangerous anomalies that the SCP Foundation needs to contain, from pathogens and parasites to malicious entities and even lethal concepts, it's sometimes easy to forget that there are plenty out there which pose no active threat to humans. That being said, an anomaly doesn't necessarily need to be harmful to humans to be extremely strange and disturbing. And SCP-962, also known as the Tower of Babble, is a perfect example of that exact phenomenon in action. This anomaly and its peculiar effects will not harm you. In fact, it will go out of its way to revere you and the concept of humanity as a whole. But once you know about the Tower of Babble, it's likely to haunt the dark spaces in your mind for a considerable time to come. As the name suggests, SCP-962 is an impressive metal spire, currently recorded at 281 meters in height, which is over half the height of the Empire State Building. It is located in the woods near a mountainous region in a location that will, for security reasons, remain undisclosed. The spire occupies a surface area of 2,575 square meters and has the distinctive characteristic of twisting and tapering off as the tower gets higher, like a giant corkscrew. Most of the tower is opaque and featureless, though the top third is partially transparent and appears to be empty. Current tests show that the tower is comprised of a variety of metals, though steel seems to be the most common. Perhaps the most prominent question is who builds and maintains a structure like this in the middle of the wilderness? The short answer is that the tower, which itself seems to be a sapient being, is in charge of its own ongoing construction and maintenance. But as you can probably tell from the frightening and pitiful creatures the unlucky hikers encountered, it doesn't do all this work without its special little helpers. SCP-962 has the anomalous ability to open up apertures anywhere on the structure for the purpose of releasing balloons, or what the Foundation has officially dubbed SCP-962-1, but what many have taken to calling by their nickname, servitors. These servitors were once normal, non-anomalous animals indigenous to the area prior to conversion in the heart of SCP-962. Like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, the servitors have undergone anomalous surgical procedures that make their bodies into grotesque parodies of the human form. Cybernetic implants have been added that force them into bipedal positions, remove snouts, keep their bodies shorn and furless. Electrodes have been implanted into the nervous systems of the servitors, allowing a remote source, strongly believed to be the tower itself, to work their bodies like puppets, encouraging or inhibiting certain behaviors as it pleases. There are currently around 13,500 known specimens of these entities, and the tower appears to be making more on a consistent basis. The servitors fulfill a wide variety of roles in service to the tower. Some mine ore in the extensive network of mining caverns beneath the tower, then smelt it to create more metal for expanding the tower or creating more cybernetic implants for future servitors. Others work in the capacity of repairing their fellow servitors or the tower itself. Some have more sinister work, making their way through the surrounding wilderness and killing any non-human life by any means necessary, and then dragging their bodies back to the tower for conversion into servitors. There's a great deal of sophistication to the electronic augmentation of the servitors. Despite their aesthetic unpleasantness, each type of servitor appears to be designed perfectly for their specific task, whatever that may be. As was alluded to earlier, the servitors never harm humans, ever. Even if a human was putting their life at risk, they would not defend themselves to the detriment of a human attacker. Approximately 60 times a day, one of the many apertures in the tower will open and release a hydrogen-powered balloon made from the skin of one of the animals brought in for servitor conversion. These balloons are always carrying strange manuscripts, believed by the Foundation to have been written by the tower itself. The manuscripts take a variety of forms: novels, poems, essay collections, the majority of which are written impeccably. While the content of these manuscripts can vary wildly, consistent motifs tend to be a high degree of optimism and reverence for humanity. Occasionally, the tower will depart from its usual written eloquence and instead offer a deranged, disjointed rant that seems to suggest a great degree of mental strain. While the exact meaning is often unclear due to the frantic nature of the writings, they generally appear to heap fawning praise on mankind, which it refers to as the Great Ones. The following is an example of one of the tower's stranger published rants. "Cleanse the world for the Great Ones. Cleanse the world for the Great Ones. Who greater than you, your majesty, your sublime nature, Great Ones, do I do right? The flesh and wood serve you, unite with the steel. You love, do you love me too? I am what you love. Great Ones, see as I do, my duty, passion, forgive the slow pace. The steel takes time. Did you like the servants? They were the best of the cleansed, only the best for you. Great Ones, made like your form, you assume here on a world to clean, to honor you. Do appreciate, please, please, I will complete the cleansing soon, and you can take me away in your ships of fire, and I can love you and you will love me." While the Foundation has yet to discover how all this strangeness started, given the current rate of expansion, it's clear that the tower is no more than 20 years old. The Foundation is also unsure of what its intention may someday be, but it's not hard to draw certain interpretations. Due to its unpredictability, which leads to the Foundation to expend not inconsiderable resources on its containment, SCP-962 has been given the Euclid containment classification. And because it's huge, remote, and immobile, the Foundation has made no attempt to move it from its current location, and instead have rerouted all containment resources to studying the anomaly and building a perimeter to prevent public interference. Anyone who attempts to enter the exclusion zone will be turned away by perimeter guards under the pretense of avoiding a hazardous nuclear waste containment facility. Anyone found within SCP-962's restricted area is given Class A amnestics to prevent any sensitive information spreading beyond the quarantine. In order to prevent the tower and its servitors from expanding the purview of their operations, the Foundation airdrops 4 live cattle and 2 tons of timber every week, so the tower is never short of raw material within its current parameters. Any balloons released by the tower are to be shot down and burned, and their manuscripts collected and filed at a secure SCP Foundation site for further study. If an escaped balloon is found by civilians, it is to be collected, and those civilians are to be given Class A amnestics. Anyone at the Foundation is permitted to read the manuscripts produced and distributed by the tower, but they are required to file a formal request with the SCP-962 project director first. I've spent a few evenings myself reading them over a cup of tea, and they're certainly stimulating, if a little tragic. They represent one of the anomalous world's greatest examples of the grass always being greener on the other side, since after all, why would anything aspire to be human? Don't humans have enough of their own problems to attend to? A young man is in the middle of one of his regular night jogs through the park. He loves running through this park at night. It's dark, the air is cool, and the sounds of the city that surround the park disappear, offering peace, quiet, and a small reprieve from the busy world. He jogs along a path that winds through the park and starts upon a section that is surrounded on both sides by tall trees. He follows the path around a sharp bend and is stopped in his tracks. Standing there, in the middle of the track, is a figure. It has its back to him and isn't moving. He's tall and so uniformly black that he almost disappears into the night. Whoever or whatever this is, he's scared of it. But the creature doesn't move, and neither does he. He's frozen, unsure of what to do, when the creature suddenly turns his head towards him, revealing a pair of bright, glowing eyes. The runner is so terrified he can't even scream. He falls and crawls backwards in the dirt, trying to get away from the creature. The creature turns its body towards him and begins stepping forward. The runner scrambles to his feet and runs. He's sprinting as hard and as fast as he can, adrenaline pumping, heart pounding, trying to put as much distance as he can between himself and that thing. His muscles burn, his lungs ache, but he can't stop. Finally, he's back at his house. He bursts through the door, locking and bolting it behind him. His girlfriend is reading on the couch and doesn't understand what's going on. After struggling to catch his breath, he tries to explain what he saw on the path, but his girlfriend just laughs. A giant man with glowing eyes? He was just seeing things in the dark. It was probably a dog, nothing that would justify the panic he was now in. The next day, he's left wondering if he really was mistaken. Those piercing, glowing eyes are burned into his mind, though. Maybe his girlfriend was right, and it really was just a dog. Yes, that must be it. His mind was just playing tricks on him in the dark. Even so, he's going to stick to running inside, at least for a little while. But he soon finds that he's having a hard time. He notices that he's running out of breath much quicker than normal. Is he coming down with something? He doesn't feel sick, but then why is he suddenly so weak? 2 weeks have passed since he saw something in the park. No one he brought it up to, not his friends, not his co-workers, have ever heard of such a thing, and no one seemed like they believed him either. At this point, he is feeling sure that he really did imagine it, but he can't get that image of whatever it was out of his head. He can't keep running on a treadmill forever, though. He misses his night runs. It's time to get over his fear. He's running through the park again, enjoying the silence and the light breeze on his skin. He continues down the path, acutely aware that he's getting closer and closer to the spot where he saw that thing before. He can't stop, though. He has to prove to everyone that he's not afraid. He has to prove it to himself. He reaches the part of the path that runs through the tall trees. Just like before, the sounds of the city melt away, the only sound coming from his steady, heavy breathing. He follows the winding path and feels his heart starting to race, but he has to keep going. He rounds the same corner, and nothing is there. He slows to a stop. Of course nothing is here. Nothing ever was. He really did imagine it. Or did he? Buongiorno. Today's file comes from the Italian branch of the SCP Foundation, SCP-015-IT, also known as the Boogeyman. SCP-015-IT is a humanoid entity that stands just under 2 meters tall. Its body is devoid of any hair, and its dark, black skin absorbs 98% of all light, making it virtually invisible in low light. Its head lacks a nose or ears, but these missing features are hardly noticed, because if you see 015-IT, its eyes are what demand all of your attention. While the Boogeyman's skin is completely black, its eyes contain light-producing organs on the irises, causing them to glow in the dark, like a deep-sea predator. Its mouth contains 8 pointed teeth on both the upper and lower jaws, and a long 28-centimeter forked tongue. The 2 tips of its tongue each have a hollow, needle-like organ that leads straight into its esophagus. More on what it does with that specialized biological feature soon. Physically, SCP-015-IT is rather slight, but it is surprisingly strong and easily able to overpower an adult human. Its skinny arms are much longer than an average human's, and each of its 4 fingers ends in a razor-sharp claw. It has also been shown to be quite resistant to physical injuries and possesses the ability to heal wounds and damage to internal organs at a hyper-accelerated rate. SCP-015-IT is primarily active at night, which is unsurprising given its skin's natural camouflage in the dark. The Boogeyman hunts mammals, with humans being its preferred prey, but it does not feed on flesh. Instead, SCP-015-IT draws its sustenance from the adrenaline and noradrenaline produced by its quarry. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are chemicals the body produces to increase heart rate, blood flow, and provide more energy to the muscles in moments of stress, or in the case of SCP-015-IT, extreme fear. And it has developed a hunting method to cause this exact reaction in humans. 015-IT will usually hide in dark spots, trying to keep out of sight as much as possible as it stalks its next victim. If it has been able to remain unseen, it will wait for a moment when its prey has become distracted, so it can silently approach them. Once close enough, it will leap towards its unaware victim, grab them, and quickly bite them on the side of the torso, near where the adrenal gland is located. It uses its large teeth to anchor its mouth in place, as it uses the needles on its forked tongue to probe into their body. With one needle, it pierces directly into the adrenal gland and begins draining the blood that is now rich with fear-induced adrenaline. At the exact same time, the other needle releases a mild sedative, allowing 015-IT to feed and then depart without risk, as the victim remains immobile. Another anomalous effect occurs when someone is unlucky enough to actually see the Boogeyman. Roughly 2 weeks after observing the creature, the person who saw it will begin experiencing various detrimental mental effects, including hallucinations and panic attacks. Some will also begin to experience physical issues, most often damage to the cardiovascular system. It is unknown why exactly these mental and physical effects occur, but it is theorized that SCP-015-IT may use it as a way to weaken certain prey that it considers too strong or potentially dangerous. In 2011, the Boogeyman was actually contained, but not by the SCP Foundation. The Brotherhood of St. George's Knights is a secret order in the Catholic Church that was created by the Pope in the year 453 to either contain or eliminate all anomalies, and it was this group that first captured SCP-015-IT, which they designated as Dia 212, in line with their own classification system. While it was in their containment, they made a number of discoveries about the creature that they labeled as a shadow demon. First, they found that while it feeds on the fear of its victims by ingesting their blood, it doesn't actually require this to survive. Dia 212, as they call it, is an unstable entity, and feeding allows it to maintain its physical shape in our reality. In addition to its impressive physical strength, the Boogeyman is also quite intelligent, as seen by its ability to successfully hunt, attack, and escape from humans. Strangely, it also appears to be resistant to weapons which have been blessed, causing only a fraction of the physical damage that they should when compared to a similar, non-holy version. During the course of research into the creature, Father Ilardi, a member of the Brotherhood of St. George's Knights, wrote that despite the creature being repugnant beyond every limit, he believed that it had a gentle soul, and that its screams are similar to a pained cry. He postulated that SCP-015-IT may have even once been a human before some dark force transformed it into the monster that it had become. He decided that it was his mission to find a way to communicate with the creature, and one day bring it back into the light and love of his god. Father Ilardi was making good progress with the creature, and it seemed like it was even growing fond of him and his disciples. But his advances were halted when they were attacked by a group of soldiers from the Fascist Council of the Occult, a terrorist group that seeks to use anomalies as weapons in their quest to disrupt the social order. In the attack, several of the Brotherhood were killed, and in the commotion, SCP-015-IT escaped. Following this, reports soon began to come from the province of Caserta that described what sounded like vampire attacks. A mobile task force was sent to the area, and while 015-IT was initially able to make use of its various physical abilities to evade and escape capture, it was eventually shot with a transmitter that allowed it to be tracked. The Italian mobile task force was able to surround the creature, but fearing being contained again, it responded with a level of violence that it had not been thought capable of. Several members of the task force were killed in the line of duty before the Boogeyman could finally be subdued. Today, SCP-015-IT is contained at Site Vittoria in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy. Since this anomaly is both sentient and highly unpredictable in its behavior, it has been classified as Euclid. It is kept in a standard humanoid entity containment cell and is monitored by video cameras and infrared sensors at all times. Due to the light-absorbing properties of its skin, its cell and the adjacent corridors are painted white and are to be kept well lit at all times. Twice a day, SCP-015-IT is given a normal domestic pig that it is allowed to feed on, Any personnel assigned to 015 IT duty must undergo a psychological assessment on a weekly basis, and, regardless of the results, must be cycled out after 3 months of exposure to the Boogeyman.
Cackling fills the air, underscored by bolts of lightning crackling across the sky. A crazed man stands in a grubby lab coat, one Dr. Viktor Lazarevich, whose license to practice medicine and storm-powered reanimation has long been revoked. The mad scientist is surrounded by bubbling containers, beakers, and flasks overflowing with smoking chemicals strewn around the room. He checks his cracked watch. It's nearly time. He darts across the room, passing between slabs covered in sheets. Underneath are his specimens, each one made exactly to his specifications, and serving as perfect examples of why the medical and scientific communities have made efforts to excommunicate Dr. Lazarevich. The scientist eyes the Tesla coils that he had affixed to the roof through an open skylight that lets in the howling, freezing October wind and brings the rain from outside pouring through. His makeshift laboratory is already a mess. He doesn't care. Checking his watch again, he reaches for a lever on the wall, waiting with bated breath for the right moment. Any second now, he tells himself, heart drumming against his ribs. He looks over at his covered creations, almost with sentiment. He's worked tirelessly to create them all, and soon the power of the storm will course through their veins and compel them to stand. Some were visible out from beneath their sheets, a patchwork arm made from fingers, a palm, a forearm, and a bicep, all taken from different cadavers and recycled. Another lies perfectly still on the slab, arms crossed over its chest. One's webbed, scale-covered hand is just poking out from underneath. They and all the others were wired up to the coil, standing on the roof above. The mad scientist's watch beeps. It's time. He pulls down on the lever just as a bolt of lightning rockets through the air, striking the coil on the roof. An enormous shower of sparks erupts from the ceiling, the lever spraying over the thin sheets on the slabs, burning holes in some of them. Electricity flows down the cables and into each of the bodies. Gradually, they begin to awaken, met by the sound of more maniacal laughing and triumphant yells from Dr. Lazarevich. They're alive. Before it became the site of an annual anomalous anthology of horrors, SCP-6531 had previously been the manufacturing center for Lazarevich wearables. Investigations into this company by the SCP Foundation yielded little in the way of actionable intelligence. All that could be learned about Lazarevich wearables was that they used to be a small-scale clothing distributor, their specialty being Halloween costumes and masks, as well as horror-themed streetwear and everyday clothing. Very few business records from Lazarevich wearables still exist. After falling victim to bankruptcy in December of 1996, any information about the company, its operations, and distributors all seems to have been thoroughly and mysteriously expunged. Efforts are still being made to track down and interview any former employees of the costume-making company to determine if any of them were aware of any connection between Lazarevich wearables and various known anomalous groups of interest. However, there also exist no records of any employees who might have worked at the manufacturing center. Similarly, no costume stores, either smaller local businesses or larger national chains, have ever reported to have sold costumes or clothing made by Lazarevich wearables, neither as seasonal items nor all year round. The only thing the Foundation has been able to ascertain is that Lazarevich wearables fell into bankruptcy approximately 10 months before the first anomalous incident recorded there took place. Still, that knowledge does little to explain exactly why these incursions manifest there every year at roughly the same time on the same day, October 31st, Halloween. One leading theory among Foundation researchers is that these anomalous incursions were triggered in the wake of Lazarevich wearables' bankruptcy as part of some attempt by Lazarevich's owners to continue the company's legacy. Alternative explanations have ranged from the company's Halloween costumes being anomalously possessed or haunted, now acting as vessels for demonic entities, deceased spirits, or some otherworldly force. All the Foundation knows for certain is that after sundown, every October 31st since 1997, SCP-6531 has been the site of an anomalous incident involving multiple entities designated as SCP-6531-1. These entities can vary drastically in terms of their abilities and appearance, but seem to be restricted to only resembling the Halloween costumes formerly created and sold by Lazarevich wearables. One year, they might appear as vampires. The following year could see a group of zombies emerging from SCP-6531. Werewolves, ghosts, and multiple instances of typical depictions of Frankenstein's monster have also been documented. Of the few scraps of information regarding Lazarevich wearables that the Foundation has been able to recover, they have been able to obtain a complete catalog of the costume company's inventory to better prepare engagement countermeasures and containment procedures for each year's manifestation. All recorded incidents, as well as details of effective countermeasures, are available upon request to all Foundation personnel assigned to SCP-6531. The group of SCP-6531-1 entities that manifest at Halloween can total a maximum of 100 identical costume creatures. They will never emerge later than midnight and will immediately dematerialize once dawn arrives on November 1st. Whether this is caused by an aversion to sunlight or some other anomalous factor that temporarily binds their existence to the night of Halloween is still unknown. These emergences can occur at any time between sundown and sunrise from any of the 3 entrances to SCP-6531. There is also no other known limitation to the amount of emergencies that can occur each Halloween. Some years have passed with only a single group of SCP-6531 entities manifesting. Other years have been considerably more challenging for on-site personnel overseeing containment efforts. Since learning of SCP-6531, the SCP Foundation has enacted standard regional containment procedures, securing the anomalous manufacturing center and the surrounding area. Civilians are barred from entering the former Lazarevich wearables facility and either turned away or amnesticized if they are found approaching. Although at present, nobody has come forward with relevant information regarding the company, should a civilian present themselves as having some foreknowledge of Lazarevich wearables, then they are to be detained and interrogated by Foundation agents on site at SCP-6531. Every Halloween, Mobile Task Force Eta-13, also known under the codename of the Horror Hosts, has been tasked with responding to the annual manifestation events. These operatives, and them alone, are permitted to neutralize instances of SCP-6531, in accordance with the effective countermeasures the Foundation has devised for each different possible type of costume creature that can appear. At present, there exists no way of predetermining which of the Lazarevich wearables costumes will appear ahead of manifestation, meaning that the horror hosts have to be prepared for any and all eventualities ahead of Halloween. Possible countermeasures involve using ultraviolet lights to eliminate vampires, electromagnetic pulse grenades to deactivate robots, and explosive ordnance for undead SCP-6531-1 instances. On the 31st of October 2021, MTF Eta-13 operative John Plummer reported for his first assignment to the task force's post overseeing the containment of SCP-6531. For their own safety, the remainder of Foundation personnel had been evacuated. The other 364 days of the year, they were normally involved in researching the anomalous building, trying to examine the exact properties of the former Lazarevich Wearables Manufacturing Center, and hoping to determine the actual cause of the annual emergencies. But on Halloween, everyone apart from Horror Hosts 1, 2, and 3 was granted the treat of a night off. At 7:15, the 3 members of MTF Eta-13 reported for one more check-in with SCP Foundation Command ahead of the night's inevitable anomalous incursions. Alongside Operative Plummer, their latest recruit, were the other 2 hosts, Alfred Snagrod and Wesley Timid, designated as Hosts 1 and 2 respectively. Each of them performed their radio checks with Foundation control, Host 1 in position with eyes on the north entrance to SCP-6531. A few feet away, Host 2 checked in at the west entrance, and Host 3 did the same, with a clear line of sight to the east entrance. Control issued one more reminder to the trio, instructing them that they were to call in each emergence of SCP-6531-1 and confirm a containment method for each one before deploying countermeasures. Host 2, Wesley Timid, welcomed his fellow horror host, letting the newly recruited Plummer know that he could rely on his teammates and to put out a call over the radio if he needed anything. The first night working at keeping emergencies contained could, by his admission, get a little freaky. Host Plummer was grateful and appreciative of his new comrade being so welcoming, and Host Timid explained he saw it as passing along the favor that former Agent Willard Baller had done for him and Snagrod when they had first joined the horror hosts. Baller had previously stationed at SCP-6531 until his departure from the Foundation, at which point Host Plummer was assigned as his replacement. However, when Plummer asked about his predecessor and why he was no longer an active member of MTF Eta-13, Host Snagrod interjected before Timid could offer any answers, commanding the other two hosts to maintain radio silence and stay alert. Within 20 minutes, the night's first recorded emergence took place, witnessed by Host Plummer at the east entrance. He observed a group of undead shambling out of SCP-6531 in numbers of around 100. Startled by the sudden appearance of so many zombies, the horror host's new recruit immediately began preparing explosive ordnance countermeasures, readying a rotary grenade launcher to thin out the encroaching horde. Immediately, Host Snagrod spoke up over the radio, commanding Host Plummer to stand down. The courtyard beyond the east entrance had already been readied for the emergence with the deployment of landmines, something Plummer got to witness firsthand, as some of the decrepit undead stepped their rotten feet in the wrong spot. A rapid series of explosions lit up the courtyard brighter than any seasonal Halloween decorations, pieces of zombies scattering everywhere, as each of them was splattered almost instantly. Plummer radioed control, informing them that the night's first emergence had been dealt with, leaving behind quite the mess. Another 20 minutes passed before the next emergence of new SCP-6531-1 instances. This time, Host Snagrod, at the north entrance of the manufacturing center, observed a trio of figures dressed in historical period clothing. It was clear that they were a group of European vampires, meaning Snagrod had only a few moments to act. Given their abilities to turn into bats or travel at speeds nearly imperceptible to the human eye, if these vampires weren't neutralized quickly, they'd be free to wreak havoc, no doubt attacking civilians and draining them of their blood. Fortunately, Host Snagrod had enough prior experience of manifestations like this and had just the countermeasure prepared. Birdseed. Radioing Foundation Control to confirm his plan, they gave him the command to engage, and the MTF operative hurled open bags of birdseed in the vampire's direction, causing it to scatter in all directions. Much to Host Plummer's confusion, this seemed to stop the three vampires in their tracks as they became fixated on the seed strewn over the ground before them. But they were trapped, standing still long enough for Host Snagrod to activate a series of ultraviolet lights. As the lamps came on, the vampires screamed vulgarities in Romanian before exploding, making soft popping sounds as they were immolated. Still baffled by the strategy, Plummer asked what the birdseed had been for. Snagrod, being slightly more forthcoming when it came to sharing containment tactics, explained that European mythology describes vampires as having a form of erythmomania. This is often an expression of obsessive-compulsive disorder, wherein individuals feel a strong compulsion to count their actions or any objects within their immediate surroundings. Using birdseed, Snagrod successfully used this counting compulsion to force the vampires to stay in one place while counting every seed. 13 minutes past 8, just short of 20 minutes after the previous incident, another emergence began. This time, approximately 24 skeletons began striding out of the east entrance, some of them armed with swords and axes. Once again, Host Plummer braced himself for a direct fight against the undead. But before he could engage, Snagrod intervened once more, telling him to stand down. No sooner had he said this did Plummer see why. The moment that the oncoming skeleton army stepped outside of the boundary of SCP-6531, they all fell apart. Host Timid chimed in and pointed out that these bony creatures had no muscles, tendons, or any of the other bodily material that keeps bones together, meaning there was nothing for the horror hosts to do but let them disassemble. Plummer noticed that the various skulls now strewn about the courtyard were vibrating, their teeth still chattering. Timid was quick to assure him that they would likely shut up after about half an hour, although it did little to make it seem less messed up. Only 11 minutes later, Host Timid witnessed the first emergence from his post of the night. Out of the west entrance, a group of 3 robots were marching into view, moving slowly, but each armed with hefty, futuristic-looking weaponry. Snagrod asked if they were sporting any visible shielding, but Timid replied, saying they looked to be old-school retro robots. He told Control he was readying an electromagnetic pulse grenade to take the 3 anomalous automatons out, but then stopped, claiming he wanted to try an alternative. he leaped out in front of the 3 robots and yelled at them, "This statement is a lie!" Immediately, the robots opened fire, prompting Control to ask Timid to report his status. All 3 of the robots had completely missed him. He already knew that, given that they were older models, their shots weren't being aided by any guidance system. The safest spot for him to stand was directly in front of their guns. Over the radio, Snagrod urged Timid trying to state a logical paradox in order to confuse the robots was pointless, and instructed him to just arm and launch the EMP grenade. Laughing, clearly not taking much of this seriously, Timid tried again, and asked the robots the confusing question of, "Does the set of all sets that don't contain themselves contain itself?" Not waiting to see how the 3 machines reacted, host Snagrod invoked what he referred to as the Baller Clause. Despite protesting that the robots probably wouldn't hit him, Timid eventually did as instructed and launched the grenade, instantly deactivating all 3 of the robotic SCP-6531-1 instances. Plummer chimed in to ask about the aforementioned clause, and Snagrod explained. Since the horror hosts had been assigned to SCP-6531 for quite some time, they were afforded considerable leeway by Foundation Control when it came to addressing each of the costume creatures' emergencies. If, at any point, one of the trio felt another of their teammates was being reckless, jeopardizing the mission or their own safety, then they could invoke the Baller Clause, which Plummer was quick to notice seemed to be named after his suspiciously retired predecessor, Willard Baller. The next emergence didn't occur until just over an hour later, at 9:29. Once again, Plummer was on the receiving side of a group of SCP-6531-1 instances, all of them scaled humanoids with fins. Yet again, he was ready to enact countermeasures and told to stand by, with Timid even remarking that host Plummer seemed to have beginner's luck. The moment that the half-fish creatures emerged from the building, they dropped and began flopping around on the ground, rendered harmless thanks to asphyxiation, since none of them were underwater. Plummer was still unsettled by having to watch the fishy humanoids' bodies flop around, slowly dying. Compared to the skulls, this seemed to be much worse. A full hour and a half passed before Plummer witnessed his next emergence, sighting 6 people brandishing various dangerous melee weapons, ranging from knives and axes to chainsaws. According to Snagrod, these were slashers and could be dealt with by using standard ammunition. However, when Plummer opened fire, the 6 approaching slashers seemed to keep coming. Timid pointed out that these were likely sequel slashers, making them slightly more robust. Upping the countermeasures to explosives, Plummer armed a single grenade and hurled it towards the slashers. All of them were caught in the blast, rendering them neutralized. As Plummer declared the emergence contained, Timid pointed out to not take his eyes off the bodies, as in slasher movies, not seeing the body could mean that the slasher survived. Judging by the disconnected heads and limbs left in the area, Plummer told him it was safe to withdraw that particular concern. 10 minutes later, at 11:15, the next emergence occurred. A group of ectoplasmic entities emerged from SCP-6531's west entrance. These were, as Timid observed, the goopy kind of ghosts. Radioing Control for assistance, he asked if the Spanglers had been properly checked. Still learning the lingo on the job, host Plummer asked what Timid was referring to by Spanglers. This was the nickname given to a series of large vacuum devices set up around each entrance by Foundation technicians, specially designed to capture ephemeral entities. Upon activating, within minutes, there were no ghosts left, the latest of the night's emergences having been successfully contained. The next came almost half an hour later, as 3 hairy humanoid entities in ripped clothing emerged. Plummer readied himself to engage using incendiary rounds, only for Snagrod to tell him that there was no need. Timid pointed out that the ground in front of the werewolves was covered in a veritable meat buffet, thanks to the leftover slasher and fishman remains. Normally, the arrival of werewolves this late on Halloween meant that all the creatures would want to do was eat, and would likely fall asleep shortly after, until the sunrise caused them to dematerialize. Although they could be disposed of easily, the werewolves posed no threat, but could be interesting to observe. Doing so was even something of a tradition among the horror hosts that Baller had started. As Plummer watched the group of werewolves, he noticed one picking up the discarded bones from the skeletons and throwing it for another to chase after. With the werewolves eventually falling asleep, and no further signs of any anomalous activity, the annual emergences at SCP-6531 had come to a close. Control dispatched cleanup and auxiliary containment crews to the site to take care of the mess left behind, while a transport was sent to pick up the 3 members of the horror hosts. Timid suggested the 3 of them enjoy a nightcap of pumpkin vodka back at base, and while he was happy to join, Plummer felt the need to ask a question that had been bothering him. It was about Baller, former host 3 of MTF Eta 13. Plummer had noticed that his new teammates seemed sentimental about their former comrade, not to mention the Baller clause being invoked whenever one of them was being reckless. Although Plummer had made it through his first Halloween at SCP-6531, he'd been concerned that his predecessor had died at this post. But both Timid and Snagrod explained that they were only sentimental about Baller because they liked him so much. He'd been a good friend to them. He'd only left the Foundation after receiving a publishing deal for a series of horror novels. Relieved that this job wasn't likely to cost him his life, Plummer then asked why the Baller clause was named after him. Barely holding back laughter, Timid explained that a few years prior, Baller had attempted to train one of the werewolves that had emerged from SCP-6531. This had led to an embarrassing encounter between Baller and a 6-foot-tall wolf creature being caught on security cameras. Fortunately, Timid pointed out, not everything involving the SCP Foundation resulted in blood and pain. Occasionally, they could be nicer than expected, with personnel able to do their jobs and go home safely, living their lives without the risk of being killed by anomalies. With that, the 3 Foundation operatives headed off together to enjoy what was left of their Halloween.
Who are you talking to? The young boy spins around, surprised to find his father standing behind him. The boy seems nervous and hesitant to answer, but after being asked again, he admits to his father that he was talking to the lady in the fountain. The boy's father is confused. The lady in the fountain? That's right. The boy explains that she is nice, just like Mom. He thinks the woman in the fountain may even be his mom. The father sighs. He takes the boy's hand and leads him back inside the house, where the father is hosting a small get-together. One of the father's guests asks if things are okay, and he tells her that everything is fine. He's just worried about his son. It has been a very difficult year following the death of his wife. He tells her that he's afraid he might be developing behavioral issues as he watches the boy staring out the window at the fountain in their backyard. Later that week in school, the children are supposed to be drawing pictures of their families. The teacher moves from child to child, checking on their progress, and stops at the boy. She wants to know what he's working on. The boy explains that it is a drawing of him, his dad, and his mom who lives in the fountain. The teacher doesn't understand. His mom lives in the fountain? That's right, the boy tells her. The fountain in their backyard was her favorite place in the whole world. His mother had told him that it was a magical place and was the reason they bought the house. After she died, he heard a voice coming from the fountain. It doesn't sound like his mom, but he knows it's her. She lives in the fountain now. The father thanks the teacher for calling and promises that he'll talk to his son. He's very sorry that the other children are frightened by the stories about a woman in their fountain, and he's going to make sure this whole business comes to an end for good. That night, as he is putting the boy to bed, he tells him that he knows he misses his mom, but he needs to stop with all of these claims about a woman in the fountain. And as much as he misses her and wishes that his mother would come back, he needs to realize that she's gone and not coming back. The father kisses the boy on the forehead and tells him one more time that there will be no more stories about the woman before tucking him in for the night. As soon as his father is gone, though, the boy gets out of bed, creeps to his bedroom window that looks down on their backyard, and stares at the fountain. He watches as reflections dance on the rippling water. The water goes oddly still, until a hand that appears to be made out of water seems to emerge out of the surface of the fountain and waves at him. The father leaves the bathroom and glances in to check on his son before heading back to his bedroom. He bolts upright when it dawns on him that his son wasn't in bed. He runs into the son's room and pulls the blankets off the bed, but no one is there. He frantically calls for his son and looks around the room when he sees something. He hurries to the window where he watches as his son walks towards the fountain. But what really has his attention is the woman, translucent and shining under the moonlight, beckoning for the boy to approach her. The father rushes downstairs and out into the backyard, where his son is in an embrace with the watery woman. He is terrified, but his fatherly instincts take over and he sprints to the fountain and rips the boy away from the creature. As he pulls the boy back from the fountain, he watches as the solid, watery figure of the woman appears to turn back into a liquid and collapse into the fountain. The father brings the boy inside the house. He doesn't understand what's going on. but the father just keeps repeating that he's okay. He's safe now. The next day, the father is on the phone with their local priest. He knows how crazy this sounds, but the police didn't believe him, and he didn't know where else to turn. The priest tells him not to worry, that he will be there soon to take care of it. The priest arrives at the house with 2 assistants and tells the father that it would be best if he and his son leave. The boy is crying, pleading with him not to hurt the nice woman in the fountain. The father has to struggle to restrain his son, but eventually is able to get him out of the house. Once they're gone, the priest turns to his assistants. He takes off his shirt to reveal a tactical vest underneath emblazoned with the SCP logo as his assistants do the same. "Time for containment," he says, as they head out into the backyard towards the fountain and the anomalous creature that lives there. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-054, also known as the Water Nymph. SCP-054 is the designation that the SCP Foundation has given to an anomalous entity with some very strange properties. Made up of 9 liters of what appears to be completely normal spring water, SCP-054 most often appears in the form of a female humanoid, but it is capable of a variety of forms, such as other humanoids and simple geometric shapes. It is unknown just how it is capable of taking and holding these shapes, or how it moves around once it does so, since all tests performed so far have failed to show any thermal, electromagnetic, biological, or other phenomenon present in its body that could explain its abilities. Whenever SCP-054 enters a body of water, it will become indistinguishable from the surrounding water, and it appears that it must fully submerge itself on occasion in order to replenish its full volume, which is constantly being reduced through normal evaporation. Water that has evaporated off of the anomaly has also been collected by the Foundation, and it too is indiscernible from regular water and exhibits no special properties. After its discovery, SCP-054 was moved to Site-08 for containment, where additional research and study of the creature could take place. Its special containment cell was made watertight and equipped with a specialized climate control system, as well as an ornate fountain filled with fresh spring water. Surprisingly, the entity seemed to enjoy its new home and appeared happy to interact with Foundation researchers, guards, and maintenance staff, frequently mimicking their forms often in a playful manner. While at first, 054 would retreat back into its fountain when it wasn't interacting with staff, as time went on, it seemed to grow more and more comfortable, and eventually came to spend almost all of its time outside of the water. Though it would still always return back to the safety of the fountain and disappear into the water when attempts were made to extract samples directly from its body. Though it avoided having its water drawn, it was through a variety of different tests by SCP researcher Dr. Seskel that much of the Foundation's knowledge of SCP-054 was gained. Though whether the methods researchers used to acquire this information were appropriate is up to you to decide. In a test dubbed the Water Loss Experiment, SCP-054 was denied access to water. As a result, its shape changed, with 054 becoming more compact, most likely in order to reduce its surface area as much as possible and reduce the rate of evaporation that occurred. For the first few days after access to water was removed, it would happily greet anyone who entered its containment cell, which may indicate that it was attempting to charm staff into providing water. When after a few days its water supply was still not turned on, it stopped acting especially cheery, perhaps realizing that its happy disposition was doing nothing to advance its cause. In an extreme temperature test, researchers were authorized to experiment with subjecting SCP-054 to temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius. The entity became more and more lethargic as the temperature in the testing area was lowered, and eventually froze completely. Ice chips were collected for study, but analysis revealed no abnormalities or differences from standard water. The opposite test was also performed, and the temperature was raised to 95 degrees Celsius, just shy of the 100-degree boiling point of water. 054 became very aggressive as the temperature approached the upper threshold at which water can remain a liquid, and it attempted to escape the testing enclosure. Researchers noticed that following this test, the entity became increasingly resistant to being moved from its containment cell to the testing area, likely fearing that the researchers intended to do it harm. SCP-054's memory was tested as well, and it proved very skilled at solving puzzles and navigating mazes. Researchers initially had an issue with motivating 054 to participate, but Dr. Seskel discovered that the anomaly was quite responsive to the use of electrical shocks. The researchers would often push 054 too hard in these tests, though, and soon found that they would need to give it a 48-hour rest period between any strenuous experiments. The final test performed was meant to gain some insight into how SCP-054 maintains its form, by seeing how it reacted to a hydrochloric acid solution. It unsurprisingly resisted this test, and the temperature in the testing area was lowered to just above freezing in order to try and control its behavior. This did not prove to be enough, though. SCP-054 fought back against Dr. Seskel and his research assistant, seriously injuring both of them and necessitating a halt to the test. In fact, all testing on SCP-054 was stopped following this incident, as it appeared to develop an extreme mistrust of males, who made up the majority of the staff who had been performing the tests. Following this attack on the Foundation staff, SCP-054 was classified as Euclid. However, once the tests ceased and 054 no longer had to come in contact with the research staff who were in charge of the experiments, there was a span of over 5 years without any further incidents. Following this period, SCP-054's rating was downgraded to safe, and now seems willing to begin participating in experiments once again, though now all tests fall under the purview of Biology Unit E7, and the use of only female personnel is recommended. Though classified as safe, caution must still be maintained when working with SCP-054. Maintenance personnel are required to wear chemical suits when working inside the containment area, and must spend 10 minutes in a special drying room once they exit to ensure that 054 has not somehow managed to cling to any part of them. In the event of a containment breach, the entire enclosure is to be flushed with liquid nitrogen to freeze the entity. Is the water nymph an example of the SCP Foundation going too far, containing a harmless anomaly who appears happy and benign until harm is done to it? Or is this simply the price we must pay in order to further our knowledge of anomalies and potentially stop a dangerous threat to humanity? The answer to that question is up to you. First of all, let's get one thing straight. He had never wanted to be a police officer. All the way through school, while the other boys were playing Guardie e Ladri, or Cops and Robbers in English, he had been inside reading. Forget playing games about criminals and pretending you're in a 50s movie. The man had always been obsessed with all things ancient, artifacts and archaeology. That was where his imagination lived. And yet now, he is one of them, a police officer, standing in a sweltering uniform under the baking Italian sun, staring at fishing boats through a pair of binoculars. Just get a degree in Latin and move to Rome. You'll be a historian in no time. What could be easier? Yeah, right. After 2 years of job searching, he'd given up. The police were hiring and said they liked the look of him. What they'd failed to explain was that he'd be trained in the Polizia Provinciale. His primary duties? Enforcing regional fishing laws. The man sighs and lowers his binoculars. The job wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the uniform. Who was Il Genio who thought that a black uniform would be a good idea in this heat? The police officer's walkie-talkie crackles. Someone's requesting him specifically. He doesn't recognize the voice. Must be a mistake or another prank. He's definitely running out of patience for those. It is his job, though. He pushes the button down and responds. Reports of a dangerous individual wandering around in central Rome, near the Colosseum, threatening members of the public and acting erratically. The police officer replies, checking they've got the right person. What's this got to do with fishing law? He isn't even in Rome right now. It'll take him almost an hour to drive back to the city. There's a pause from the other end, then the voice crackles back through. You speak Latin, right? It was only a little thing, but it annoys the police officer for the whole drive back to Rome, his beat-up hatchback winding its way through the traffic with a siren blaring. You don't speak Latin. No one speaks it. It's a dead language. You study it, you read it, you can write it, you can speak it if you want, but no one speaks Latin like they speak Italian. Nice to use the siren for once, though. But sure enough, as he pulls up the handbrake, parking down a crowded side street, thank God for Polizia parking privileges, the voice he can hear yelling from nearby does appear to be speaking in Latin. The man must be very agitated. The officer can hear the shouts quite clearly even through his rolled-up windows. It doesn't take long at all to locate the disturbance. Polizia vehicles, much shinier and bigger than his own, block off the entrance to the square. Officers with colorful berets stand shoulder to shoulder, blocking off members of the public and tourists who all swarm close, trying to get an eye on the commotion. The police officer wearily pushes his way through the throng. The officers blocking the way smirk at his uniform and point at his car parked down the road. The longer he tries to persuade them to let him through, the more he feels like he's being pranked. Until suddenly, a senior officer with an even more colorful beret appears behind them and barks for them to let him through. The constable leads the police officer through the row of cars and into the square. It's mostly deserted. A few officers armed with tasers stand nervously in front of the various cafes and gelaterias, but everyone has eyes only for the man in the middle of the square. Brandishing a shovel, the man is yelling at the top of his voice. He swings it wildly at any little movement, and every few seconds looks down at his body in a state of total confusion. His face contorts constantly, fluctuating between savagery and utter fear. What is most strange about this man, however, is what is sitting on his head, an ancient Roman centurion's helmet. The police officer recognizes the helmet almost straight away. He remembers it from one of his textbooks at university. It looks to be one from the Marian reforms, roughly 100 years BCE. "Go on, talk to him," the constable hisses in the police officer's ear. "He's speaking Latin, isn't he? Speak to him." Sure enough, the crazed man is speaking Latin. His accent is rough, but totally natural. The words flow from his mouth as if he's been speaking the language all his life. But that wouldn't make sense. No one speaks Latin. The police officer steps forward and clears his throat. A megaphone is shoved into his hand. He raises it to his mouth and speaks into it. Immediately, the crazed man turns towards him and starts brandishing the shovel, wild panic distorting his face. The officer instinctively lowers the megaphone. The man's eyes follow the device. That was clearly a non-starter. The officer slowly lowers it to the ground and raises his hands, palms out to the man. He tries again. His Latin is rusty, very rusty, but he manages to introduce himself. The man's eyes meet his. The shovel stops swinging for a moment. When he speaks, his voice is a notch calmer. Only a notch. "Publius Cartaphilius Aetius, Roman centurion, hero of the Jugurthine War. I serve under the command of the consul Gaius Marius." The police officer lets out a long breath. This is going to be an interesting day. He isn't sure what kind of drugs this grad student has been taking, but this level of delusion can't have just come from one too many all-nighters in the university library. The officer, hands still raised, holds eye contact with the man. He politely explains that Consul Gaius Marius is not here right now in what must be very formal Latin. That only seems to distress the man. He swings the shovel wildly round again, pointing it at the ruins of the Colosseum standing proudly over him. "What has happened to my city? Which barbarous nation is responsible? I will slay every newborn male and have the mothers stitch their scalps into a cloak. I shall wear it as I parade the streets of their capital." Maybe slight overkill. It was mostly just a few earthquakes that had toppled the Colosseum. Not entirely sure who he could take that up with. God, maybe? But the Romans had already had a go at slaying his offspring. What is so confusing about this man finally registers with the police officer. Well, aside from the obvious. The man is dressed in modern clothes. He talks like an ancient Roman, brandishes a shovel like a sword, is wearing a centurion's helmet, and yet, from the neck down, he's dressed in khakis and a polo shirt. The police officer asks the man where he's come from this morning. The man looks stumped by the question. The more he thinks about it, the more agitated he seems to become. The officer is about to divert the man's attention when he spies a pair of military police personnel approaching the man from behind, tasers at the ready. The officer cries out a warning, but it's too late. The barbs sink into the man's flesh, and the current flows through him. His muscles seize up, his body convulses, and he collapses to the ground. A sea of dark uniforms descend on him, obscuring him from view. All that can be heard are his screams. Several hours pass before the police officer gets a call back on his walkie-talkie. He spends the afternoon checking in with the station repeatedly about the strange man's situation. Before long, his requests are met with radio silence. But that evening, just as he is finishing up his shift, a call comes through. It is brief and tired-sounding, but it tells him what he needs to know. The man is being held in a station nearby. By the time the police officer sits down across from the centurion again, it's clear that the man is exhausted. Bruises cover his arms, his lip is busted, and he has a nasty swelling pushing against the inside of his helmet. Apparently, the guards had tried to remove the helmet earlier, but the man had grown so violent that they decided it wasn't worth the effort. "Where did you get that helmet?" the officer asks, nodding to it. "Barracks Commander Quintus Sextus Caeso gave it to me." That wasn't particularly helpful. The officer racks his brains, trying to think of how to get through to this man. He notices the soldier across from him keeps glancing up at the ceiling. He follows the man's eyeline and realizes he must be looking at the fluorescent tube light flickering slightly above them. The soldier is muttering something under his breath about dark magic. The police officer tries to explain that the light is essentially just a different kind of oil lamp. The soldier snorts derisively. He knows a cursed object when he sees it. Cursed object? The police officer studies the helmet more closely. It can't be a replica. There's no way. The nicks on the sides, the rusting around the edges, the oxidation of the bronze elements. It looks utterly authentic to what a 100 BCE helmet should look like. You've told me where you got your helmet. Where did you get your clothes? The soldier stops grumbling. His jaw clenches slightly. He does not answer for a long time. When he does, his voice has lost some of its bravado from before. These garments are not my own. I awoke wearing them. This body... The officer can piece together the rest of the sentence without the man saying it. This delusion must be running so deep that the man is completely disassociated from his own body. Then, all of a sudden, the soldier starts talking. He talks for several minutes without stopping for breath or interjections. At times, his voice swells with pride. At other times, it cowers with fear. But he speaks with a clarity and determination that goes beyond delusion. However impossible it may seem, the police officer has no choice but to believe that the man sitting across from him was, in fact, Publius Cartaphilius Aetius. He'd fought in the Jugurthine War, a battle which the Romans had won, capturing King Jugurtha. Publius had been one of the centurions tasked with escorting the captured king back to Rome in chains. The soldiers had all drawn lots to determine who'd be on guard duty on which night. Publius had drawn the shortest straw and ended up guarding the king on the last night. The night of the Triumphus. The police officer took a second to remember what the Triumphus was. After a battle, on the final night, the Romans would throw a huge party celebrating their victory. While all of the other soldiers were out drinking and sleeping with the local women, Publius stayed up all night watching the king in silence. The king spent the night trying to bribe him, persuade him, flatter him, say anything to try and win his freedom. When nothing worked, the king grew frustrated, then angry. In a spitting rage, he started to curse the centurion. The soldier recounts the curse word for word to the police officer, who sits in stunned silence. A chill comes over the room as he speaks. Spirits of the underworld, I consecrate and hand over to you, if you have any power, Publius Cartaphilius Aetius. Whatever he does, may it all turn to ash. Spirits of the netherworld, I consecrate to you his limbs, his head, his shadow, his brain, his mouth, his nose, his speech, his breath, his liver, his heart, his lungs, his intestines, his stomach, his arms, his hands, his knees, his calves, his heels, his toes. Spirits of the netherworld, if I see him wasting away, I swear that I will be delighted to offer a sacrifice to you. A king's sacrifice. Publius punched the king square in the face, but a sense of unease came over him over the coming days. As the king was dragged through the streets of Rome, humiliated publicly, and executed, he had remained utterly calm, staring at Publius whenever he had the chance. Desperate to clear his mind, Publius went out drinking with his fellow soldiers. They had a raucous night, feasting, sleeping around, steadily losing consciousness, until Publius passed out in an alleyway. The centurion stops talking. His hands begin to shake, and his face contorts again. The police officer waits patiently, but the man does not continue his story. A single tear streams down the man's cheek, followed by a second on the other side. Then, suddenly, both eyes are streaming, and he is shaking uncontrollably. A guttural cry fills the room. The police officer reaches across the table to take the soldier's hand. It's the wrong move. The soldier jerks back away from him, straining at the handcuffs holding him to the table. Panic fills his face again, the same panic that had torn at his face in the square earlier that day. He lunges for the police officer to attack him. At that moment, the door bursts open and a group of men charge in, restraining the soldier. They push the police officer back so hard he falls on the floor. These men aren't dressed in polizia uniforms at all. They're wearing totally unremarkable black suits. One of them removes the helmet from the man's head and shoves it into a containment box with the words SCP Foundation printed on the side. The others restrain the man, but he suddenly stopped resisting. In a daze, the man looks around the room, his face utterly bewildered but harmless. There's no fight left in him, no soldier. The police officer clambers to his feet and approaches the man. Publius, are you okay? The police officer says in Latin. The man stares blankly back at him. Where the hell am I? He says in perfect Italian. That helmet, referred to herein as SCP-2901, now lives in a much more secure box in the artifact containment section of Site-19. In order to prevent the helmet from rusting or undergoing any significant wear, it is kept in a waterless environment. The layer of blue-green oxidized bronze is not to be removed, as it acts as a protective layer for the unoxidized bronze underneath. As the police officer observed, the helmet bears no distinctive features at all that would distinguish it from any other artifact helmets from the same era. The notable exception, of course, being that the helmet is inhabited by the former Centurion Publius Cartaphilius Aetius, also known as SCP-1510-1. When the helmet is placed on one's head, the wearer's consciousness and body will be taken over by the soldier, who gains total control over their motor functions, thoughts, feelings, everything. However, this effect is not universal. Only males can be affected by SCP-1510, and they have to be aged between 28 and 35. It is theorized that this is to approximate the age and gender of SCP-1510-1 when he was alive in ancient Rome. Historical accounts seem to verify the account that this SCP gives of its life. While there are obviously few records remaining of 107 BCE, those that do exist align with his version of events, and nothing it has reported during interview sessions have seemed historically inaccurate as of yet. Interview sessions are held using D-Class personnel who don the helmet. While no noticeable long-term effects have been observed from wearing the helmet, long-term studies on the health consequences are ongoing. Initial interviews proved futile. SCP-1510-1 was immediately distressed at the point of aggression and violence for the first 5 sessions, attempting to attack the interviewers and fight its way out of the containment facility. However, upon the commencement of Interview 7, SCP-1510-1 was noticeably calmer. After apologizing for its previous behavior, the SCP was willing and able to share its life story and how it found its way into the head of a grave robber in modern-day Italy. The first part of the story is the same as that told to our police officer earlier. The point where SCP-1510-1 grew upset and violent with the police officer roughly corresponds to the ending of interview log SCP-1510-1-6, where the SCP requested a break to gather its thoughts. The next day, during interview number 7, the SCP told the rest of its story. It awoke in the alleyway after an indeterminate amount of time, still inhabiting the body of Publius Cartaphilius Aetius. However, that body was now a corpse, having died in the street from unknown causes, possibly alcohol poisoning, choking on vomit, or a head injury. In a state of distress, SCP-1510-1 was conscious as its body rotted away, fully sentient and aware of everything that was happening as its body deteriorated before its failing eyes. The corpse was soon discovered by a pair of local beggars who, noticing it was still alive, summoned a Haruspex. A Haruspex was a person trained in the art of divination who would study the entrails of deceased animals to find meaning. Upon examining and cutting apart the corpse of Publius Cartaphilius Aetius, the Haruspex concluded that the body was marked by the Furies and was a herald of tyranny reborn. The beggars quickly carried the body away and buried it outside of the city in an unused grave. SCP-1510-1 describes the experience that followed as a kind of fading. The helmet remained on the body, but the body deteriorated over time, steadily sapping the SCP of any sensations or stimuli. It appears the helmet needs a host in order to see, hear, smell, taste, and otherwise react or interact with the world. Removed from a host, it enters what it refers to as darkness, a time where it hovers between consciousness and unconsciousness, aware and thinking, but simultaneously resting in a kind of void, unable to observe the world or interact with it. For over 2,000 years, SCP-1510 remained in this state, until a sudden awakening. A grave robber in Italy, the man brandishing a shovel in khakis and polo who ended up sitting confused in the police station, was responsible. Local police interviews revealed that the man has a history of digging around Rome and across Italy, looking for ancient artifacts to sell off to the highest bidder. Upon discovering SCP-1510, this man had proudly put the helmet onto his head, not realizing the effect that it would have on him. Almost instantaneously, the man's body was taken over by SCP-1510-1, who, after centuries of darkness, now suddenly found itself in the bustling heart of Italy's biggest city. Electric lights, smartphones, cars, sirens, tourists, everywhere SCP-1510-1 looked, it saw technology totally alien and otherworldly, overlaid and built into a city it had once known. In a state of utter panic, the SCP grabbed the nearest weapon it could find, the shovel used to excavate it, and started to attack those around it. Not exactly the best wake-up call. Nowadays, however, SCP-1510-1 is highly cooperative, having had time to process the world that it has awoken into and the loss of the world it left behind. It holds on to a soldier-like sense of duty. SCP-1510-1 still worships the ancient Roman gods, and as such, believes earnestly that Jupiter and Juno have a hand in keeping it alive. It has explained to interviewers on multiple occasions that there must be a purpose behind its continued existence, and that it is keen to work with SCP personnel in any way it can so as to achieve that purpose. While still being held in Latin, conversations with SCP-1510-1 are positive and at times jovial. It has a keen memory of its life in ancient Rome and can give very valuable insight into events that occurred at the time. This gives the Foundation vital intelligence in uncovering and tracing the origins of further SCPs that were theorized to have been present during the Yugertine War in what is present-day Algeria.
The Foundation field agent lays in the dirt, an iron spear sticking out of his chest. Not long after, a Foundation scientist screams and writhes on the ground, his face burnt by corrosive chemicals. Down in the depths of a dark, filthy cave tunnel, several mobile task force agents lay in a trap, pierced by homemade punji sticks, as deadly forces amass their numbers in a hidden place below. All of these members of Foundation personnel have been brought to their knees by an anomaly you'd never forget. The year is 2014, and researchers at the League for the Protection of Birds have started to notice a troubling trend in the area around Lake Grenouillot. The population of birds there appears to be sharply declining. Investigations into this phenomenon determine that this decline is due to a dramatic drop in the local insect, worm, and slug populations, which have previously served as the birds' food source. At this point, as the bird enthusiasts are left scratching their heads, the unusual ecological change attracts the attention of embedded SCP Foundation agents. Field agents Michel Duvarier and André Moulin are promptly dispatched to the forest around the lake. The two agents, disguised as hunters to roam the area without attracting suspicion, take up temporary residence in a wooden cabin. The first 3 days pass without incident, and Agent Moulin is becoming restless by the third night. He didn't expect his first field mission to involve quite so much birdwatching and taking lovely but boring nature walks. Meanwhile, Duvarier has made peace with the mission, content with the opportunity to take a break from the near-death experiences that so frequently plague her line of work. She's happy to kick back on the cabin's porch and delight in the sight of the occasional owl. As for the disappearing birds and insects, she'd just as soon believe it was climate change. Not everything is anomalous all the time, after all. As the two agents sit on the porch, they suddenly spot a few members of the League for the Protection of Birds and one of their vans. That, in and of itself, isn't that unusual, but they also spot something crawling toward the van, clutching an iron-tipped spear. Agent Moulin can scarcely believe his eyes, but sure enough, there is a 1.5-meter-tall frog person, dressed in a dark green uniform, brandishing a weapon. Uncertain of the situation and eager to evaluate it further before making a move, the two agents remain where they are, watching as the frog creature pokes at the empty van with its spear. It pries open the vehicle's hood, removes the oil container, and nervously retreats from the area. At this point, Agent Duvarier gives the order to follow the frog and determine where it is taking that stolen oil container. They track the frog, careful not to be spotted by the anxious amphibian until it reaches the shore of Lake Grenouillot. Then, it suddenly stops, inflates its vocal sac, and croaks, long and loud. Two different voices croak in response, and two frogs emerge from the woods to meet it. Another emerges from the woods, a bit too close to the agents. It spots them and screams in terror, hopping away and running toward the water. The other frogs, startled and suddenly aware of the intrusion, dive into the water. Agent Moulin, unwilling to give up the chase so soon, pursues the running frog. It looks at him with wide, fearful eyes, shrieking in shockingly fluent French for him to stay back. In an act of desperate self-defense, the frog throws its spear, piercing Agent Moulin in the chest. As he collapses, Agent Duvarier moves quickly, drawing her hunting rifle and shooting a tranquilizer dart into the frog's neck. It falls to the ground, unconscious. Thanks to Agent Duvarier's quick intervention, Agent Moulin is rushed into treatment and able to fully recover from his injuries. Meanwhile, the frog person is brought to the nearest testing site, where it is given the official designation SCP-5457. As soon as it regains consciousness, the frog begins to display hostile behavior. It attacks testing staff, showing an impressive grasp of various combat styles and strategies. Notably, its aggressive behavior seems to be entirely motivated by panic. The frog is utterly terrified of seemingly every human it encounters. In order to get to the bottom of the creature's behavior and hopefully understand its motivations, Dr. Béranger sits down for an interview with it.
First, the frog is placed in high-security full-body restraints to prevent it from using the ability to coat its limbs in mucus and slip out of standard restraints, which it displayed several times when first brought into custody. Next, Dr. Beranger enters, escorted by 2 armed guards. The frog becomes immediately distressed, fixated on the sight of Dr. Beranger's white lab coat. It refers to him with notable dread in its voice as a chef. Perplexed, he corrects the amphibious prisoner, identifying himself as a department chief. First, Dr. Beranger asks the creature for its name. It introduces itself as Sergeant Martin Duval and insists upon its commitment to its people, who it will not betray no matter how many knives are used on its slimy body. Dr. Beranger scoffs at this and inquires about the frog's obsession with torture. He attempts to engage the frog politely, offering to make its cell more comfortable in exchange for cooperation. The frog goes silent, staring at the scientist with a look of solemn determination. It takes a deep breath. Assuming the frog is about to admit something sensitive, Dr. Beranger encourages it to release whatever it's holding on to. And it does. It spews a massive amount of corrosive bile directly into Dr. Beranger's face. The doctor lets out a scream of agony, falling to the ground. One guard rushes to his aid as the other tightens the frog's restraints. Though the frog is exhausted and overwhelmed by the ordeal, its lips purse into a satisfied smile as Dr. Beranger is carried off to the medical ward. There, he's kept under observation for 2 days as his body is racked with high fevers and severe intestinal pains. Eventually, the symptoms subside, and he is discharged and cleared to return to work. In case of any future incidents, the medical staff develops an antitoxin that can be used to counter the effects of another similar attack. During Dr. Beranger's time in the medical ward, staff attempted to conduct several follow-up interviews with Sergeant Duval, but it refused to answer any questions and attempted to attack anyone who got too close. Meanwhile, back in the area surrounding Lake Grand Rio, agents have been spotting more and more of the frog people gathering resources from the forest. When the agents track these groups of frogs, they discover a massive cave system that appears to house an entire civilization of these intelligent frog people. They will later learn this is the République de Basse-Grenouille, or the Republic of Under-Frogia. A task force of 25 agents is sent to explore the caves and gather as much additional information as possible. None of the agents could have ever predicted the strength of the Republic's military forces or the frog's preparedness for a potential invasion. When the agents first descend into the caves, they accidentally trigger a trap which launches iron-tipped spears from concealed compartments in the cave walls. 5 agents are wounded by these spears and are forced to return to the surface to receive medical treatment. Another trap is triggered soon after, but the remaining agents are ready for it this time. They dodge its spears and manage to make it through an additional trap that drops buckets of toxic bile from above, relatively unscathed as well. Feeling optimistic, they continue to advance through the cave system. After 3 hours of exploring, they reach the heavily fortified ramparts of the Republic. The frog soldiers fire on sight, using a combination of artillery and siege weapons to force the agents into retreat. During the process, 7 agents are killed and 13 are injured. As tensions between the Foundation and the Republic grow, with no peaceful resolution in sight, Agent Moulin requests the chance to speak with Sergeant Duval. He and Agent Duvalier are granted permission to do so and are permitted to enter the observation room adjacent to the sergeant's cell. The frog is shocked by the sight of Agent Moulin, whom it believes it has killed. Much to Moulin's shock, the frog believes that he has come here to eat it in an act of revenge for it nearly killing him. Agent Duvalier presses this matter, demanding to know why the frog is so convinced that it will be eaten. Is it because you're a frog and we're French? Is that really all there is to it? The frog admits that it is as simple as that.
We've seen what you do to those like us. We know what you've done to us. Why do you think we hide from you?
Agent Duvalier is shocked. She doesn't really enjoy frogs' legs at all and doesn't consider them to be an especially popular ingredient. As for Agent Moulin, he's a vegetarian. They attempt to steer Sergeant Duval toward the subject of his homeland, which they have now discovered. He is horrified by this news, assuming that his people are doomed to a gruesome, butter-basted fate. Duvalier and Moulin attempt to convince the frog to cooperate to get the rest of the Republic to cooperate. The Foundation can't leave the Republic alone now that it knows a frog army is living beneath France. Either peace must be established, or the potential threat must be neutralized. The 2 agents offer Martin a deal. If it wants to help its people, it can cooperate with the Foundation and help them make non-violent contact with Under-Frogia. Martin is not a frog who takes such things lightly and spends the next 4 days deliberating over the Foundation's offer. It asks to speak with Agents Moulin and Duvalier, inquiring about the nature of the Foundation as an organization, about its intentions toward the people of Under-Frogia, and, without fail, whether or not either agent is secretly planning to eat it. Eventually, it announces a willingness to cooperate. Agent Moulin, Agent Duvalier, and Sergeant Martin Duval all sit down at a table together to confer. First and foremost, Martin warns that the frogs will not negotiate with anyone who is French. They will not trust them, and any reasonable Under-Frogian would sooner eat their own skin than listen to a French person. As a brief cultural note, it is considered a social taboo to eat one's own shed skin in Under-Frogian society. In terms of winning the trust of the amphibians, the Foundation can do so with food. Martin explains that the crops and cattle of Under-Frogia were decimated by an epidemic, and the people are starving. This is the reason for the sudden appearance of frogs on the surface, scavenging for food and other resources. This very same scavenging caused the drop in local wildlife populations, attracting the Foundation's attention in the first place. So if the Foundation wishes to make a good impression on Under-Frogia, it should offer its support in the form of food-based aid. Martin agonizes over its decision to open up to the Foundation officers, worried it may not have done the right thing. Agent Duvalier attempts to assuage these fears, promising that the Foundation doesn't go out of its way to kill anomalies, and that the containment staff will likely be able to help the Under-Frogians remain hidden, keeping their home safe and sound. Martin, however, will not be permitted to return to them, at least for the time being, as it is a valuable negotiation asset, as well as an intriguing test subject. Martin accepts this, willing to do its duty to protect the rest of the frogs. After this conversation with Martin, the Foundation develops a new strategy. Foundation agents from the United Kingdom travel to the front lines of Under-Frogia, where they stage a fake attack on the French Foundation agents there. To the citizens of Under-Frogia, this new group of, notably non-French, humans appears to drive the French forces away from their gates. At this point, these new UK agents offer food supplies to the Under-Frogians, the specific contents of which were chosen based on suggestions from Martin. At this point, with enough goodwill established between the Foundation and Under-Frogia, a peace treaty was able to be signed, establishing the nature of their containment. The current special containment procedures for SCP-5457 are as follows. Because it is not feasible to contain all instances of SCP-5457, instances of the species are considered to be contained on-site, in their home under Lake Glenouillot. The Foundation is responsible for regulating tourism and research in the area, in order to prevent any civilians from discovering the Republic of Under-Frogia. Food, materials for the manufacture of common goods, and other necessary supplies are to be regularly delivered to Under-Frogia by the Foundation. This will prevent the frogs from needing to conduct any expeditions to the surface, allowing them to remain hidden. In addition to these material resources, security consultants and other necessary aid will be given to SCP-5457 in order to aid them in their quest to conceal their existence from humanity at large. No French personnel are permitted to interact with SCP-5457, and during these interactions, personnel are instructed to make frequent references to the popularity of frogs in French cuisine. The more afraid the frogs are of the French, the less likely they are to attempt to escape containment. A healthy fear of the French and their supposed desire to eat frogs helps keep Under-Frogia hidden. If the Foundation must artificially stoke the flames of that fear, then so be it. Following the signing of the peace treaties, an exchange program is established between the SCP Foundation and the Republic of Under-Frogia, under the leadership of Dr. Graham. Shortly after its establishment, the program reported massively successful results. One of the most notable discoveries resulting from the exchange is the abundance of advanced chemistry and genetics research conducted by the Under-Frogian scientists. In exchange for this knowledge, the Foundation teaches the frog scientists about steam-powered technology, which they plan to implement in their society, particularly where it applies to defense and concealment strategies. Throughout the exchange program, Foundation staff also do their best to keep the Under-Frogian fear of the French alive and well. Misinformation is propagated, such as the claim that the French enjoy boiling frogs alive to remove the grease and slime from their bodies. During the exchange, Foundation diplomat Cameron discovers that Terrare is a significant cultural figure in Under-Frogia and the object of a great deal of fear. She accompanies Assemblyman Trunion, an Under-Frogian politician, to a production of a play about the terrors of Terrare. After the production, she takes the opportunity to bond with Trunion over the fear of being devoured by a Frenchman. She shows the Assemblyman some carefully curated and edited footage of SCP-082 Fernand the Cannibal as he devours all manner of meat, human and otherwise. The Assemblyman is sick to his stomach at the sight, and the very next day introduces a bill to increase the Under-Frogian military budget, specifically with regard to the development of heavy siege weapons. As the Foundation's relationship with the frogs improves, some older frogs reach out with concerns about the impact the human-frog peace is having on the youth. The young frogs and tadpoles are no longer as afraid of humans and seem to be confident they could safely venture to the surface. To nip this in the bud, Dr. Graham performs a series of lectures at Under-Frogian schools, teaching the children about the evils of the French. He shows them footage of frog dissections performed in human science classes for good measure, scaring any surface-dwelling aspirations right out of them. Years pass, and the Republic of Under-Frogia begins to resent the continued containment of Sergeant Martin Duval. They demand its return on the basis that it is no longer needed as a hostage in light of the stable diplomatic situation. The Foundation agrees, and Martin is returned to its beloved home in the Republic. As Martin readjusts to life in Under-Frogia, it sends letters to Agents Molan and Duvalier. But that isn't the only way it's passing its time. In secret, Martin has been organizing a rebel movement of frogs, convincing them that the Foundation is lying and that they can live safely on the surface. The number of frogs involved in this movement steadily climbed, reaching 370 by 2017. At this point, Martin cannot wait any longer. They attempt to break out of containment once and for all. Soldiers and scavengers alike exit the perimeter without much trouble. Foundation security personnel attempt to stop them, but only capture 12 frogs. The rest of them scatter, vanishing into the forest. The only thing the Foundation can think to do is dispatch a response force, sending Foundation agents into the forest to recapture the frogs. One of the agents assigned to this task is none other than Agent Duvalier. She tracks Martin to a forest guard outpost, where he is hiding with 22 other frogs. When she enters the room, all of the frogs dart toward the back wall, pressing themselves against it in fear. Martin encourages them to calm down and greets his old ally.
Michel.
She responds in kind. Martin. It inquires about André and his whereabouts, and Duvalier responds that he's left for a position with the mole rats, and she hopes she won't have bad news for him when she sees him next. She pleads with Martin, asking it to return to Under-Frogia. The other frogs will certainly follow. Martin refuses.
Home? You mean this damp and dark hole? Normal? You mean living under a lie that suffocated us for generations? We were stuck down there, stagnating in the caves, and it was all for nothing. That's what I told them. Showed them that we could live on the surface. It's amazing here. We can feel the sun on our faces, the wind on our pores, drink fresh and natural water. So, no, Michel.
At this point, Martin croaks loudly, signaling all nearby frogs. Agent Duvalier steps outside to find frogs exiting the woods, surrounding her location. Martin steps outside after her, moving to block her path. She draws her weapon, aiming it at the frog she had begun to consider a friend. You can't hide here. People will find you. They'll freak out.
Sure,
Martin responds.
But it's not like they'll eat us.
She pleads with Martin, begging the frog to retreat, to not force her to do something they will both regret. Martin refuses. A frog soldier has its duty, and this is Martin's duty for the people of Under-Frogia. Martin promises that it will never back down. Agent Duvalier turns, surveying her surroundings. There are hundreds of frogs watching, waiting to see what happens next. Martin continues.
In time, all of us will conquer our fears, and we will become examples for the rest of the people of Under-Frogia. We'll show them that there's no reason to fear the Frenchmen, just like I am showing them that I do not fear you. My people will live free from terror.
Agent Duvalier takes a deep, long breath. Tears sting her eyes as she prepares to do something she once promised she would never do. She steadies her aim. She opens her mouth. She tries not to think about what her duty now requires. Days later, Agent Duvalier writes a formal request to Site Director Verne. It reads as follows.
Director Verne, I understand that I need my full memories for the Ethics Committee hearing tomorrow. After all, I have to be able to provide a full account of what happened. But whatever the verdict may be, I am formally requesting to go under amnestic treatment after the conclusion of the hearing. I won't need those memories anymore. And I really want to forget the taste. Sincerely, Agent Michel Duvarier.
Duty can be the force that propels us, that helps us fight for the greater good. But it can also drive us to do truly terrible things. You know, I've never had very much interest in trying frogs' legs. Now, after looking into the details of SCP-5457 and the horrors they faced, I can say that my small amount of interest has been reduced to 0. It's best to leave things be, I find. As they say, let sleeping dogs lie. And let sentient frogs with an intricate societal structure and an understanding as well as fear of their own mortality, well, live. It is November of 1966 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's a crisp, clear night, the kind of natural beauty only autumn in Appalachia can bring. The lush green mountainsides have gone fiery as the season changed from summer to fall, vivid oranges, reds, and yellows flooding the landscape and turning the hills into a sunset. Now, in the dim light of the moon, the colors are muted but still glorious, dancing in a silvery blue glow. The spooky fun of Halloween has come and gone, leaving the warm, cozy feelings of the harvest, of fresh-pressed apple cider, corn mazes filled with happy families, cuddling up around a fire with a flannel blanket and a mug of something hot and sweet. Some people think Christmas is the most romantic time of the year, or Valentine's Day, or spring, when the wildflowers bloom and the breeze carries their perfume through the town. But to at least one happy couple, this is the most romantic thing they could possibly imagine. They're a young man and a young woman, driving down the winding country road. They're so in love, and they feel like the only two people in the entire world. At this moment, life is good. They're driving just to drive, to crank up the radio and enjoy being alone together. But after a long stretch of road with nothing much in sight, they decide to drive a little bit further away from town, over toward an area nicknamed the TNT area, for its former life as a World War II munitions plant site. Now, of course, it's just mostly wildlife out there, but it'll look beautiful at night, and it should be completely private. As the car winds around a curve in the road, the woman thinks she sees something out of the corner of her eye, and her heart skips a beat, taking her back to long-forgotten childhood fears. As a little kid, she always used to get nervous driving at night, imagining a monster running alongside the car as it went, trying to catch her. She used to picture long, pale limbs and big eyes, something loping along on all fours, dipping in and out of sight between the moonlight and the shadows. She would have nightmares about what the creature might do if it ever caught up to the car, if it ever reached through the window and pulled her out into the darkness. But of course, that was just a flight of fancy, the sort of thing a bored child's mind cooks up on a long drive. Imagining monsters where there are just dead tree branches or nocturnal animals. But now, seeing motion in the forest out the window, she feels that same breathless terror she felt as a little girl. She doesn't even realize she's squeezing her boyfriend's hand too tight until he pulls it away with a wince. "Easy, before you crush me." He laughs, but there's worry in his eyes. "You okay?" She nods, shaking off the feeling. "Sure, I'm fine." She privately chides herself for being so silly, for letting her own imagination get the better of her. She's lived in Point Pleasant all her life. She's no stranger to wildlife. Animals come out at night sometimes. It's just as much their world to live in as it is hers, she reminds herself. She's just starting to settle in, to let herself relax, when she sees it again. A fluttering motion, like great big dark wings, flapping at the edge of the area illuminated by the headlights. Something about it, the way it moves, the way it shimmers in the light, that seems to shine right through it like black mist. It feels deeply wrong. Like the old stories her grandfather used to tell her about the things you see in the mountains late at night, things you never want to come close to. He'd once told her about a mountain lion with the face of a woman, or a deer he watched stand up on its hind legs. She'd never seen anything quite like that, but the feeling he described, the deep sense of the unnatural, the way her mind and body recoil instinctively from this sight, feels the same. "Did you see that?" she asks, her throat so tight that her voice comes out in a whisper. Her boyfriend shakes his head. "See what? There deer out there? You know, a deer completely wrecked my last car, ran right into me. He was fine, got up and walked off like nothing happened. Me, on the other hand, no, it wasn't a deer." She shakes her head. "Never mind, it's silly." But the little break in her voice makes him pause.
He turns the wheel, pulling the car over by the side of the road, and parks there. Hey, look at me. What's got you so shaken up? He puts a hand on her shoulder, giving it a comforting squeeze. I thought I saw something. She sighs, feeling absurd as she says it out loud. Well, you probably did. All kinds of animals out here. But it's fine, they're more scared of us than we are of them, he reassures her. She shakes her head, frowning. No, I know that. It wasn't an animal, I think. I couldn't quite see it, but I got this awful feeling. All the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Whatever I got a glimpse of, I can't explain it. I just feel like there was something wrong, like it wasn't supposed to be here. She rests her face in her hands, struggling to find the words. He rubs her back, unsure what else to do, what else to say. They sit like that for a long while, before she finally sits back up. Want to go home? He asks. She nods weakly. I'm sorry, I know you wanted to go driving more, it's a new car. He cuts her off. I want to do what you want to do. Come on, let's go by the diner and get a couple burgers, see if they've got any cherry pie left. Sound good? She nods. Sounds great. The young man is just about to put the car back in drive when there is a sudden fluttering motion, something moving through the headlight's beam. This time, they both see it, and they can only watch wide-eyed as it settles to a stop directly in front of their car. There, the size of a grown man with a 10-foot wingspan, is something unlike anything they have ever seen before. It's massive, dark gray, its face shielded from view by the limited light, with one notable exception. Boring into them are a pair of glowing red eyes, wide and piercing. Then, with a flap of its wings, as quickly as it appeared, the strange thing is gone again. The couple sit in complete silence for a long time before they turn to look at each other. They don't speak, but their expressions both say the same thing. You saw that too, right? Still too shocked to speak, the young man cranks the engine with trembling hands, and the two speed off back down the deserted road toward town. They have to get back. They have to call the police and tell them... What? That they saw a monster, a flying man with glowing eyes? Will anyone even believe them? Suddenly, the young woman's voice breaks through the tense quiet in the car. Behind us! She cries out. The man glances in the rearview mirror and sees what he would assume were red headlights if he didn't already recognize them. Sure enough, the massive thing is flying behind their car, following them along the road. The car takes a turn, and so does the creature. The car speeds up, and it flaps its wings to catch up to them. It doesn't do anything else, doesn't try to grab them or break the back windshield, it just follows them, watching with an expression that he could almost call curiosity. Then, after 5 tense miles, it just disappears again, and they're alone. Truly alone. That chill on the back of their necks is gone, and they know that wherever that creature came from, it's gone back there, at least, for now. When they make it back to town, they pull into the police station and rush inside. They can hardly get their words out as they try to tell the officer on duty what exactly they saw. He's skeptical, of course. 2 scared kids seeing things that aren't there, he assumes. But they insist again and again that they know what they saw. He humors them, listens to their story, and suggests that it was some sort of large wild bird. Animals' eyes reflect light, he reminds them, and everything looks worse at night, especially when someone is already all worked up. Realizing they won't be believed, the couple head home and get ready for bed. But they don't sleep. They can't. All they can think about is that massive figure landing right in front of their car and staring directly at them. Its unbelievable wingspan, its speed, the strange interest it had shown in following them home until it disappeared without a trace. What did it want? Will it ever come back? As they lie in bed, staring up at the ceiling and replaying the events of the night again and again in their minds, they wonder if they'll ever get the answers to those questions. One thing is for certain, though. They'll never forget those eyes as long as they live. Contrary to what the police officer thought about their story, this pair of young lovers were not the only ones to see the strange, winged creature around Point Pleasant. Over the next month, others reported seeing similar things, and soon, eyewitness accounts were pouring in on a regular basis. A pair of volunteer firemen saw it while on duty, describing a massive bird with bright red eyes. A police officer reported seeing an unusually large bird-like animal with eyes that reflected the glow from his flashlight. A group of gravediggers doing their work looked up from their shovels to see something large, dark, and winged fly through the sky overhead, temporarily blotting out the moon. It soared overhead and landed in a far-off tree. All over town, people reported sightings of the creature, and the story grew and grew. The sheriff tried to calm the townspeople down, positing that it was just a sandhill crane, a large bird with a 7-foot wingspan and reddish coloring around its eyes. But the reports kept coming in, and they only got more bizarre. Some said it could fly over 100 miles per hour. Others said it could appear and disappear at will. A man in Salem, West Virginia blamed the creature for strange patterns appearing on the screen of his television set, and for strange noises he heard outside of his home at night. Then came the strange being's most infamous appearance. Eyewitnesses saw it, a massive, shadowy winged figure, on the night of December 15th, flying over the Silver Bridge, a suspension bridge over the Ohio River. Soon after this sighting, the bridge collapsed, and 46 people lost their lives. Though a fracture in the suspension chain was the culprit, people whispered around town that this mysterious creature was somehow responsible. If not responsible, then the monster was at least connected. It had to be. How could it be a coincidence? This mysterious apparition grew to be known as the Mothman, or simply Mothman. But to the SCP Foundation, it had a different name, SCP-2901. And according to their findings, there wasn't just one Mothman, but an entire species. SCP-2901 refers to a species of carnivorous scavenger creatures that, thus far, have demonstrated limited intelligence. They stand at an average height of 1.7 meters and generally appear to have an ellipsoidal shape, with 2 large red eyes covered in photophoric tissue. Their bodies are covered in tiny iridescent scales, similar to those found in moths, butterflies, and other insects belonging to the Lepidoptera order. They are not bound by standard rules of space or time, and are able to move through both at will. This gives them seemingly impossible abilities such as levitation, flight, teleportation, and the emission of an acoustic cancellation effect thought to help them avoid detection. In spite of these talents, they are still impervious to some ordinary forces, such as standard firearms. Due to their unique abilities making them especially elusive, these creatures have proven difficult to contain using conventional methods. Not only that, but it has become increasingly difficult over time to keep the general public from discussing the possibility of their existence. The first appearance of SCP-2901 on record occurred in West Virginia in 1967, shortly before the catastrophic collapse of the Silver Bridge. Since then, SCP-2901 instances have gone out of their way to avoid humans, keeping to themselves as much as possible and vanishing from sight when approached. However, they have continued to manifest near the sites of various disasters, appearing to a handful of eyewitnesses in the location approximately a week to a month before something terrible occurs there. Somehow, through a predictive ability compared by some researchers to a sense of smell, they are able to detect when an event resulting in multiple fatalities will occur. Once they have first appeared in an area, the creatures will remain there and guard it until the disaster comes to pass. They are extremely territorial, fighting with each other for dominance over the area, and even changing their shapes to frighten humans that wander into their territory. Once the disaster has occurred, the instances of SCP-2901 in the area will scavenge the dead until there is no more food left for them. Then, they will disappear once and for all, leaving no trace behind. Because SCP-2901 cannot be physically contained, the SCP Foundation has instead put guidelines in place for managing the creature's appearances, as well as what to do if an agent encounters one of these ethereal beings in the field. Cases involving SCP-2901 are assigned to Mobile Task Force 5-5, also known as the Twilighters, not to be confused with fans of a certain young adult vampire romance series. Any civilian encounters with SCP-2901 should be addressed with standard amnestic procedures, and any media leaks regarding the creatures such as social media posts, YouTube videos, or local news reports will be deleted or otherwise countered by the Information Detraction, Censorship, and Rescission Division. Field agents have been instructed to avoid SCP-2901 if possible, and carry mobile devices capable of SMS messaging in the event of one of the creatures using acoustic cancellation. If an operative comes face-to-face with an instance of SCP-2901, and there is no way to avoid a direct confrontation, there are specific steps that they must follow in order to minimize casualties. First, do not attempt to run away from the creature, lest it be provoked to chase after you. Second, hold your ground and maintain eye contact. Do not show weakness. Third, make a threat display, similar to the display the creatures use to frighten civilians away. Use your clothing to make yourself look bigger, stand on your tiptoes, and spread your arms wide. Continue this step until SCP-2901 either loses interest or is intimidated into standing down. If the creature approaches, do whatever you can to keep from touching it. Throw objects or brandish a makeshift weapon if you must. Though they do not tend to deliberately harm living humans, the fluctuating nature of the creature's position in space and time causes direct physical contact between them and a human to result in a dermal fusion. Essentially, they become stuck together. But the creature does not realize this. When they then attempt to flee and leave the human behind, the results are painful, to say the least. Imagine the feeling of ripping off a large Band-Aid. Now multiply that by 1,000, and multiply again. One more time? That's what it feels like. Though these guidelines were put together with Foundation field operatives in mind, they may come in handy for any civilian who accidentally crosses paths with SCP-2901. Should you find yourself in that unfortunate position, I hope that this information will help you avoid unnecessary trauma and pain. One more thing. I initially believed the preceding information to be all the available research into the nature of SCP-2901. However, after obtaining some additional security clearance through methods I won't detail here out of concern for the safety of all involved, I was able to locate this classified entry into its official file. It is a missive from the Information Detraction, Censorship, and Rescission Division, and details a practice of containment known as Operation Surgeon's Photograph, intended to act as a public disinformation campaign regarding the nature of SCP-2901. The purpose of this operation is not to conceal information about SCP-2901 from the public, but rather to control the information they have access to. A summary of the operation's methodology and ongoing success was included, and reads as follows. SCP-2901's current evolution is the sum of Foundation efforts in manipulating its existence through public perception. SCP-2901 are a group of extra-dimensional entities that lack a stable cohesive form and purpose that only coalesces through continued observational reconciliation. For SCP-2901 to maintain a stable physical mass, approximately 75% of the nearby human populace within 500 kilometers need to be congruent on a singular concept of what SCP-2901 is and what it does. SCP-2901 were first discovered and categorized as highly unstable Keter-class entities, capable of producing localized CK-class scenarios at random. Further research into SCP-2901's unstable manifestations proved to be futile, as, unbeknownst to Foundation scientists at the time, SCP-2901 would involuntarily change during each subsequent observation. During a containment breach into the civilian-populated areas within the Appalachian region of the southern United States, SCP-2901 began gradually condensing into a singular manifestation the more it was exposed to humans. Civilians began conceding to the idea that SCP-2901 was a dark, winged-like humanoid with large red eyes, which corresponded to pre-existing local folklore. SCP-2901 also began to evolve predatory-like behaviors and anomalous acoustic effects that conceptualized due to the mass fear generated within the surrounding communities. Foundation researchers recognized the effects and began isolating SCP-2901 as much as possible. However, deprived of regular perceptual input, SCP-2901 began to devolve into its initial highly unstable manifestations once again. The decision was made to maintain SCP-2901 in a functioning, manageable state through continued exposure to human perceptual belief that SCP-2901 is a tangible creature of local folklore, another Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster. The nearby Silver Bridge collapse of 1967 and the SCP-2901 Appalachian incursion, in reality, have no connection with one another. However, public opinion strongly disagreed, and henceforth SCP-2901 began to appear at other future disaster events. This was the precursor of the precognitive scavenging animal-like behavior that is observed today. Efforts are to continue gradually introducing notions developed by the Foundation as to further SCP-2901's evolution into a more docile and manageable concept. I'm not sure I appreciate the implication that Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster don't exist. I, for one, am still holding out hope. But this finding still does compel me. Belief is a powerful thing. It can shape the world around us in unexpected ways, and apparently can even shift the nature of an entire race of creatures that otherwise refuse to abide by our rules and our understanding. Who knows what these beings will look like, how they will behave a few years down the line. For now, they are shadowy, precognitive scavengers, waiting in the wings for humanity to encounter disaster, then picking up the leftovers for themselves. They may not mean us any harm, but the sight of them can and should still strike terror into the heart. If you're ever out on your own and you spot a wide pair of glowing red eyes in the darkness, hear the rustle of leaves, of something floating through the trees like a cloud of black mist, you should probably leave that place immediately. You won't want to be there for what's coming next, because whether it takes a day or a month, SCP-2901 only goes where it knows it will be fed.
An elderly woman wakes in the middle of the night to the sounds of chaos just outside. She stumbles out of her bed in her nightgown, carrying a lantern, and rushes to check on the cows in her field. From a distance in the dark, she can see one of the cows lying on its side, dead. Standing over it is a fox, but something is wrong with it. The animal is standing on two legs, using its paw-like hands to tear at the cow's corpse. She drops her lantern and screams. It is the late 1940s, and the world is still reeling from the destruction and devastation of the Second World War. While nations are trying desperately to rebuild and citizens are mourning the fallen, the SCP Foundation has no time to grieve. Anomalous threats don't come to a stop just because the rest of the world is trying to put its collective pieces back together. For the members of the 5th Squad of the Eastern Division of the SCP Foundation, a global tragedy must take a back seat to smaller, localized, and potentially anomalous tragedy in the form of several unusual deaths in Busan, Korea. 3 agents are dispatched to the area and told to investigate while posing as reporters covering the story. When they first arrive, they hear about a troubling eyewitness account that has steered local authorities in the direction of animal attacks. An elderly woman saw something eating one of her cows, a mix between a fox and a human. Naturally, the authorities have written her off, but something in her story rings true to one of the agents. He can remember tales his grandmother once told him, sadistic old bat that she was. Stories of fox people with razor-sharp claws and fangs glistening with fresh blood. The other 2 agents have similar cultural stories to share, folk tales about women who were foxes in disguise, living amongst hapless humans. Some of the stories were romantic, about fox wives marrying human husbands, having children and families. Others were horrible, too horrible to repeat. The 3 agents can only hope they haven't stumbled into the latter type of story. But when has a mission from the SCP Foundation ever led to a fairy tale outcome? The 3 men begin to comb the area, searching for any evidence of this creature, a fox person with a taste for hunting cows, and perhaps humans as well. Before very long at all, they stumble upon a beautiful young woman sitting serenely under a waterfall. Clad in nothing more than a light robe, she tries to nervously hide her bare feet at the sight of the strange men. But she doesn't do a very good job. The 3 agents can plainly see, in place of the feet of a human woman, she has paws covered in reddish-brown fur, the feet of a fox. This must be a young, inexperienced creature of her kind, they realize. Otherwise, how could they have tracked her down so easily? If the men were smarter, less blinded by lust, laziness, and an eagerness for simple answers, they might have asked more questions. Questions like, why did we find her so quickly? Why isn't she hiding? How did she get close enough to kill those people when she's so bad at concealing herself? But they don't stop and think, don't stop to ask those questions, and that oversight will be what seals their fate. After realizing that the agents intend her no apparent harm, the fox woman smiles warmly at them. She invites the men to come back to her cottage with her for a hot meal and the chance to meet more of her kind. At first, Agent 3 is unsure about the offer, but the other 2 accept eagerly, swayed by the majority vote, and reminding himself that they are 3 armed men against 1 slender, if anomalous, woman. He relents and accepts the invitation as well. They follow the lovely woman, like flies buzzing eagerly into a spider's web, without the slightest inkling of what's to come. When they reach the cottage, they find it modest but homey, rustic but warm. It has a certain undeniable charm, the same charm shared by the woman who led them there. She sits them at the dining table, the picture of delighted hospitality. She insists on serving them, and they are all too happy to let her. She pours them cups of plum wine and dishes out bowls of rice, pickled turnips, and perfectly seasoned meat. After dinner, with full bellies and sleepy, wine-fogged minds, the agents decide to stay the night in her guest beds. After all, why shouldn't they? The creature seems to mean them no harm, and she has no reason to feel threatened or try to attack them in any way. They'll see about containment options in the morning, after a good night's rest. Sometime in the night, Agent 3 wakes to find Agent 1 is gone. Strangely, he must have gotten up to use the bathroom in the night, or rather to make use of a bush outside, since there is no formal bathroom in the cottage. The thought reminds Agent 3 of his own full bladder, and he tiptoes out into the night to relieve himself. As he stumbles through the darkness, he suddenly hears muffled groaning, the wet slap of flesh against flesh. All at once, it hits him. Agent 1 must be out here, and from the sound of it, he isn't alone. Surely he wouldn't, but up ahead, he can make out the silhouettes of Agent 1 and the Foxwoman together. That's a Foundation ethics violation of some kind, it has to be. Agent 3 opens his mouth to say something when Agent 1 suddenly collapses to the ground in front of the Foxwoman. As his eyes adjust to the dark, Agent 3 can see that his fallen friend's shirt is stained with blood, and his throat has been ripped out. In her clawed hand, the Foxwoman holds Agent 1's liver, steaming with body heat in the cool night air. She lifts the organ up, examining it with a hungry glint in her eye. Then she opens her mouth, sticks out her tongue, and swallows the liver in a single gulp. The sight reminds Agent 3 of a snake devouring a mouse, and his stomach turns as disgust, horror, and grief overwhelm his system all at once. He watched as the Foxwoman lowered one extra sharp fingernail, using it like a scalpel, and began to cut at the fallen man's skin. All at once, his legs are able to move again. He sprints back toward the cottage, shaking Agent 2 awake. Agent 3 can't quite get his words together. His thoughts scrambled from the horror he just witnessed, but he manages to get one coherent sentence out. "We need to leave. Now." Before Agent 2 can ask what the hell is going on, Agent 1 walks into the room as if nothing ever happened. Much to Agent 3's shock, the man doesn't have a gaping hole where his liver should be. That's impossible. But wait, his eyes. They're glowing yellow. That's not an SCP Foundation agent. Something is terribly wrong. Agent 3 doesn't have time to explain to the other agent what's happening. He doesn't have time to think. All he has time to do is draw his weapon and fire at the imposter. As anyone might do in this maddening situation, Agent 2 draws his weapon, pointing it at 3 and ordering him to put the weapon away. 3 tries to explain, to convince him that the man he just shot is not their friend, but the Fox in disguise. He won't listen, promising to put Agent 3 down like a mad dog for killing their comrade. That's when the Fox sees her opening. She grabs hold of Agent 2 from behind, knocking the gun out of his hand, causing it to discharge. Agent 3 cries out in pain as the bullet pierces his flesh. Only his upper shoulder, thankfully. Not a fatal wound, but it still hurts like absolute hell. He collapses to the ground from the pain, screaming, while the Fox laughs at his misery. It's a truly demonic sound, a loud, high cackle, like nothing he's ever heard before. The sound is too much. He has to get away from it, away from her. Put something between him and this monster. He drags himself into the living room, pulling the rice paper screen door shut. It won't protect him, but at least he doesn't have to look at her. Unfortunately, another horror awaits him there. On the dining table, laid out like a roast pig ready for carving, is another agent, a man he and the others saw at the base of the mountain a day before. But now, his eyes are wide and glassy, his skin pale and lifeless. He spots the empty bowls, and all at once, the sickening truth washes over him. Their dinner. That meat wasn't pork or beef. It was human. And they didn't eat it with rice, but with maggots, crawling over the meat, slippery and white. His stomach can't help but empty itself, and as he heaves onto the floor, he sees a few maggots still alive in the vomit. No time to think about it anymore. No time to sit with the horrors and let them paralyze him. He needs a weapon, and fast. He manages to snap off a piece of a wooden beam, breaking it into a jagged edge. He angles it just right, just in time for the Foxwoman to tear through the rice paper door. He jams the jagged edge of the wooden beam into her stomach and makes a run for it. He tears out of the cottage and into the forest, tripping over the rugged landscape and fighting through the agony of his gunshot wound. Suddenly, the sound of running water, a welcome oasis in the dark and the terror. He stumbles onto the riverbank, attempting to wade through the water and cross. But he has too many forces working against him. The pitch-black night, the fear, the pain, the confusion from the blood loss. He slips on the wet rocks, hits his head, and is swept away by the rapids. He floats down the river for at least half a mile before he grabs hold of a branch strong enough to pull himself back out of the water. As he drags himself onto dry land, heaving and gasping, he realizes something. He recognizes where he is. The van is just a few feet away. He has a sudden revelation. Fire. In the stories he heard growing up, fire was always the key to defeating an evil force. He doesn't have the keys, but that doesn't matter. He busts through the window and opens up the back. There it is, a Foundation-issued defoliant projector, better known as a good old-fashioned flamethrower. This should do it, if that evil woman manages to track him down again. As if summoned by his thoughts, there she is, emerging out of the tree line. She smiles at him, eyes gleaming with menace. He raises the flamethrower and prepares to rain down hell on the monster that killed his friends and fed him their flesh. Several days later, a Foundation retrieval team manages to track down Agent 3. They find him with the Foxwoman, whom they manage to capture and bring into custody. He is a shadow of himself, pale, sweaty, body fighting off a severe infection. He's quickly taken to a hospital to recuperate. Meanwhile, the Foundation is able to study the Foxwoman, who is designated SCP-953, the Polymorphic Humanoid. About SCP-953, a few things are certain. She is a female red fox, approximately 8 kilograms in weight, with a spine that splits around her 26th vertebra into 9 separate tails. She has polymorphic properties and is able to take on various other forms. Most commonly, she takes on the shape of a beautiful Korean woman. Whenever in a human form, however, she does still maintain at least one fox-like characteristic, such as ears, paws, tail, eyes, or mannerisms. If she is able, she will attempt to conceal these elements through various methods of disguise, such as clothing, hats, and hairstyles. In addition to her polymorphic abilities, SCP-953 is observed to possess other supernatural abilities. She has the power of suggestion and telepathy. She can convince others of falsehoods, concealing her nature and the nature of things around her. While the Foundation is discovering this, Agent 3 is busy recovering from his injuries. When he is discharged from the hospital, he sits down for an interview with the Foundation Assistant Director. He lays out the Foundation's plans to terminate the Foxwoman, given her malicious nature and unknown levels of power. Agent 3 vehemently opposes this choice, begging them not to do so. He advises them to contain her, but to be cautious about how they do so. Ordinary methods, he advises, will not be effective. He pleads with the Foundation to consider the creature's nature, saying, "She's spiteful. Every little slight in her eyes, she saves up, and the only way she knows how to repay an insult is death. Chaining her to the wall like an animal, when she gets out, and she will get out, she's going to kill everyone who had the slightest thing to do with it. She won't settle for anything less." He gives suggestions for what the Foundation can do to contain the creature, but above all, insists that she be kept alive. At this point, the interviewer points out that the agent has been visiting SCP-953 in her containment cell. He questions the agent's motives, suggesting he might have Stockholm Syndrome. The agent refuses to consider that possibility. In return, the interviewer has him taken to Site 51 for psychological analysis. The containment procedures are left unchanged. The interviewer includes this note with a transcription of the interview. On a side note, I am appalled by the level of superstition expressed by the agent throughout the course of this interview. I am recommending that his suggestions regarding containment be disregarded for a more scientific approach. We're not old Korean fishwives here. I'm sure we can think of something more effective than dogs and needles. Not long after the interview, SCP-953 escapes from custody, killing several Foundation personnel in the process. They managed to recapture her, but she escaped again, and again, and again. After her 6th escape, the Foundation is unable to track her down. She remains unseen for years, sneaking around under the radar, as the Foundation waits for the inevitable bloodbath that will ensue when she gets bored enough. Years pass, and the date of the annual YIFCon rolls around again. This is of little interest to the Foundation. Why would they be monitoring the goings-on of a small furry convention? Well, maybe they should be, because there is no better place in the world for a foxwoman to pass unnoticed. If anything, with only her ears and tail showing through her human form, she's a bit underdressed compared to the rest of the attendees. A few convention-goers stop to admire the beautiful woman with the reddish-brown fox ears and tail, but most of them don't even give her a second glance. Unfortunately for the convention's attendees, she has far more malicious plans than supporting small businesses by purchasing some art or a body pillow. She passes out cards with her room number on them to various strangers, inviting them to an after-hours party in her room. With her friendly face and gorgeous smile, how could they say no? After all, it's a friendly event, and nothing bad ever happens at YIFCon. When a dozen anthropomorphic animal enthusiasts arrive at SCP-953's room, they find a few bottles of wine and an uneasy atmosphere. Still, they're excited to socialize and thrilled to have been invited to an after-hours party. They don't notice her sliding the deadbolt into place behind them, placing her body between them and their only exit. An hour later, another hotel guest calls the police to alert them to the sounds of horrific screams coming from down the hall. But when the police arrive, they can't hear anything. The place is eerily quiet. As they approach the offending room, they hear the sounds of a respectfully tame party inside, and a beautiful woman answers the door, assuring them that everything is fine. The officers turn and leave without a second thought, and as the victims inside the room continue to scream, the cops can't hear a thing. They don't know it, but they're trapped in her thrall. The next morning, a hotel housekeeper knocks on the door of the ill-fated room. No one answers, and there isn't a Do Not Disturb sign on the door, so she lets herself in. As soon as she opens the door, she regrets it. There, so engrossed in her gleeful bloodlust that she doesn't even notice the intrusion, is SCP-953, surrounded by dozens of corpses. The housekeeper calls 911, but after stuttering out a few words on the situation, a clawed hand grabs hold of her hair and yanks her back inside. The poor housekeeper will never be seen again. Not alive, anyway. Fortunately, it was enough information to alert the Foundation to the situation at hand. Unfortunately, by the time they arrive on the scene, there are over 24 corpses littering the hotel floor. One is stuffed into a mattress, another hanging over a shower curtain rod, one rolled up in a carpet, and another is strewn across a banquet table. Any survivors are brought into Foundation custody and given Class A amnestics to wipe their memories. The convention concludes early, under the cover story of a dangerous gas leak. During the chaos, the Foundation managed to bring SCP-953 into custody. This time, they acknowledge the need to amend the containment procedures they have been using. They can't let her escape again. Today, SCP-953 is kept in a Type 4 containment cell at Site-17. She is provided the following necessities: fresh liver daily, clean drinking water and plenty of it, a futon and clean bedding for it, which is laundered weekly. When she is on her best behavior and has been especially non-violent, she is occasionally presented with a small luxury item, such as a book, a dessert, or a bottle of plum wine. Direct human contact with SCP-953 has been strictly prohibited due to her psychic abilities. Delivery of her food or any other items is to be carried out by an automated robotic assistant. In addition to her physical containment, psychological measures with a folkloric origin have been employed. The entrance to her containment chamber is lined with open-cage dog kennels containing Korean Jindo or American Foxhound dogs. She will not approach any canines out of an apparent aversion, especially when one is barking. SCP-953 is considered extremely hostile, dangerous, and armed at all times, given the nature of her razor-sharp claws and numerous deadly abilities. I found this addendum attached to her official file concerning folklore control procedures as they pertain to SCP-953. As a reminder, staff assigned to SCP-953 are to follow all instructions for interacting with the subject, no matter how odd or arbitrary they may seem. Keep in mind that the people of Asia interacted with these beings for centuries before we came onto the scene. What we think of as fairy tales were their version of special containment procedures. Personally, I hope to never encounter SCP-953 under any circumstances. Though, as I say that, a disquieting thought crosses my mind. It's entirely possible I have, at some point, and simply didn't know it. After all, she is capable of shifting her shape in countless ways, and is a master of trickery and deception. I may very well have crossed paths with her before. I suppose I'll never know for sure. All I know is that I still have my liver. For now. And for that, I am very, very grateful. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-4966, Tabioka, Devourer of Souls, Consumer of Secrets, Lord of Munchies.